Chapter 552. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Fang Yuan didn't see Su Li's face clearly and fainted. The long darkness didn't make him think much. It seemed that someone specially cast a tranquilizing spell and let him have a good sleep. When he woke up again, he was in a wing room. As soon as he opened his eyes, Fang Yuan heard Su Buwang's excited shout. Wake up, Uncle Fang wakes up. There was a sound of footsteps outside the door immediately, and then a gray-haired medical practitioner felt his pulse. How is it? Su Qingtan and others asked with concern. The old man moved his palm away in surprise and replied, It's weird. When Lord Fang Cun came back, he was obviously seriously injured. Not only his internal organs were damaged, but even his pubic region was cracked. I thought that Lord Fang Cun would be in a coma for at least half a year. I didn't expect that he woke up in 3 days, and 90% of his internal injuries were healed. It's really a miracle. Su Buwang was overjoyed when he heard the words, That's good. No matter if he is weird or not, Uncle Fang is blessed by heaven. Su Qingtan thought for a moment and said with a smile, What Wang said is right. It's good that he is well. Thank you, Mr. Bai. Lord Qing, you flatter me. I'll go to see Lord Zui again. Su Qingtan glanced at Su Buwang with a faint smile and said, I'll go with you. In the blink of an eye, there were only Su Buwang and Fang Yuan in the room. Fang Yuan looked at Su Buwang quietly. Feeling the tolerance in his eyes, Su Buwang immediately lowered his head and looked ashamed. He stammered, Uncle Fang, although he couldn't remember clearly after the appearance of the Bloody Mist man, the memory before condensing the Bloody Mist was clearly imprinted in his mind. He actually fought with Uncle Fang, and he almost killed Uncle Fang with his own hands. And Uncle Ling Mo was also seriously injured. In the past few days, he stayed at Fang Yuan's bedside in fear. He didn't even dare to sleep. His mind was full of random thoughts. Fortunately, things didn't go bad. Fang Yuan showed a gentle smile and said, I don't blame you. You are just controlled by the master of the bloody world and you can't control yourself. Don't blame yourself. Su Buwang's body trembled slightly, and the stone in his heart finally fell off. He scratched his head and smiled, I knew it. That's a trick of the blood realm, but why did it have to be me? Uncle Fang, I really can't figure it out. Also, those strange memories, they should all be fake. My mother is a maidservant. How could she have become a Holy Spirit blood in the reincarnation mirror? No. Fang Yuan shook his head calmly and said with certainty and decisiveness, Your mother is Su Li, the owner of Reincarnation Mirror. Su Buwang suddenly widened his eyes and stopped breathing. The extreme negative energy zone was filled with swamps. Su Li sat in the nothingness, holding the opposing blood bead in her hand, and her body glowed with faint soul light. Occasionally, some ghosts were attracted, but they would be caught by the little girl, Hong Baizhu, and put into the Black Lotus ring instantly. After a while, Su Li opened her eyes, and the shimmer on her body slowly faded. After solving the problem of the blood realm, she came here to continue to collect ghosts. In addition to feeding Su Bai, it was inevitable that she would trigger nature's punishment when she fought against the holy sects in the future. Naturally, the more ghosts, the better. However, the strength of the ghosts in the extreme negative energy swamp was limited. Unless there were some powerful ghosts, Hong Baizhu would take care of the rest. Su Li used the saved time to study the opposing blood bead. It only took her 2 or 3 days to study it thoroughly. This thing has been activated. You can carry it with you. It can improve your physical body, consolidate your foundation, and even awaken some talents. It's a good treasure. But the opposing blood emperor died a long time ago, and the inherited practice method left by him is incomplete and of little value. Su Li frowned. Su Li erased the incomplete practice method, and then called, Black Lotus. Wow, Black Lotus reluctantly got out of the ring. Master, what can I do for you? Don't play dumb. Su Li threw the opposing blood bead. You know what to do. Black Lotus pursed his lips and almost cried. For tens of thousands of years, he managed to scrape and steal so many practice methods. How could he just hand them over? Master, don't talk about conditions with me. Since you recognize me as your master, Wang is your little master. If you don't take out a sect inheritance, it will be too degrading. Inheritance of a sect. Black Lotus stared at her with grief and indignation. Little Su Li, do you think that every treasure can bear the inheritance of a sect like me? This bead is just an imitation of the opposing blood bead. It's the limit to put the holy inheritance in it. If it is improved further, the bead will be destroyed. Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and listened carefully. Black Lotus suddenly felt that he had regained some of his dignity. Then he shook his head and said, even if it's a holy inheritance, it will be lost if it is put in this bead for a long time. I have never heard of the opposing blood emperor. Since ancient times, the strong have their names. How can the title be determined by the treasure? This person must not be a powerful person. Lord Black Lotus, you know a lot. Su Li said faintly and looked at Black Lotus with a faint smile. Black Lotus suddenly woke up with a shiver and realized that he had spilled the beans. With cold sweat on his forehead, he hurriedly said, You flatter me. My knowledge is not as good as yours. Well, since you don't want to talk about the past, I won't force you. Prepare a holy inheritance as soon as possible. Even if it is an imitation of the opposing blood bead, it is better than nothing. Su Li waved her hand. Black Lotus smiled bitterly and returned to the Black Lotus ring with the opposing blood bead. Then he slapped himself in the face. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Ha 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 ha. The reincarnation beast came out of the darkness with a smile. After so many years, you still have the bad habit of showing off. You really haven't made any progress, unlike me. Black Lotus's eyes twitched and he sneered, unlike you, a stupid donkey. You have lived for so many years but still fell into the trap of the human clan and ended up with your body broken. Compared with you, I am much smarter. You. The reincarnation beast was poked in its sore spot. With anger flashing in its eyes, it rushed to Black Lotus and bit him. Damn it, stupid donkey. I have given you face, haven't I? Eat my foot. No. The two spirits fought like street gangsters in the ring space, which was so childish that people couldn't bear to look at it. Su Li withdrew her gaze and couldn't help laughing. Black Lotus always thought that she couldn't see the scene in the ring space, but Black Lotus hid it, so she naturally couldn't completely confess her trump card. After messing around for a while, Black Lotus quickly found a suitable holy inheritance, integrated it into the opposing blood bead, and handed it to Su Li. This inheritance is called Chen Lian. Although it is not an inheritance of a school, it is also a top one among the holy inheritances. Many disciples of a school practiced it in those days. This method is all-encompassing. You can practice both Dharma and body, and you can draw stars to refine your body. The only defect is that it needs a lot of pneuma and blood to support it. However, with the help of the imitation opposing blood bead, there is no defect. It can be said that they complement each other. It is the most suitable for you to practice. Su Li nodded with satisfaction and suddenly asked, Black Lotus, what is the real opposing blood bead like? What is its ranking among the most precious treasures? Black Lotus was silent for a moment and sighed. Anyway, it is not a secret. It is okay to tell you. The opposing blood bead ranks 8th, and it can control all the blood in the world. It was also extremely terrible in ancient times. It was the most precious treasure of the evil circle. Speaking of this, Black Lotus changed his tone. These treasures have been destroyed except for me. Only the imitation is left, which is not very useful. Sulit smiled slightly. In this way, your ranking is at least above the 8th. But I don't see anything special about you except that you can hoard goods. Black Lotus suddenly sweated on his forehead and said embarrassedly, I have survived from the catastrophe, but I have lost a lot of things. I am not as brave as in the past. Really? Suli asked meaningfully. Black Lotus suddenly felt stressed. When he was racking his brains to think about how to explain, Suli changed the topic and said, what about the treasure in Fang Yuan's body? Black Lotus was relieved and quickly replied, Tianhe's sect originally didn't have the most precious treasure. Its ancestor gathered the power of the whole sect 8,000 years ago to refine this treasure. It is called Tianhe. Although it is a little mysterious and its grade has reached my level, it has not been precipitated for a short time after all. Its spiritual wisdom is not developed. If you take it seriously, it is not the most precious treasure. The real precious treasure doesn't need to be controlled. Just like me, as long as you tell me. Well, I will go back. You keep the girl and continue to catch ghosts. Don't eat too much. If the quantity is less, I will hold you responsible. Suli waved her hand to interrupt Black Lotus and went away in a flash. It is more and more difficult to fool this girl. Black Lotus wiped his cold sweat and looked at Hong Baizhu with sparkling eyes. The little girl immediately stepped back in fear, but her little face was very stubborn. She pouted and said, I won't let you eat too much. Hong Baizhu caught 2036 ghosts. I remember it very clearly. Black Lotus's face suddenly darkened. How long had it been? The little girl became as stingy as that girl. In the Juice City, there was a jubilant atmosphere everywhere. Even the violent conflicts were much less. The three forces even held a banquet together to celebrate the disappearance of the Blood Circle. The banquet was set in the largest Linli building in the Juice City. The banquet extended from the restaurant to the surrounding streets. The whole city celebrated together and no one was refused. How generous they are. Suli walked to the door of the banquet and chuckled. Of course. The Linli building is the first force in the Juice City. It is rich and overbearing. This banquet is held to show the demeanor of a big sect for the great victory in the Blood Circle. Suli turned her head and saw a young practitioner in a purple gold robe looking at her. Although Suli covered her face with a veil, her beauty made the young practitioner's eyes brighten. He was shocked by her beauty. At the same time, he was also cautious. Such a beautiful female practitioner walked alone in the Juice City. What did it mean? He was not a good-for-nothing who only thought about beauty. The great victory in the Blood Circle. I am a casual practitioner named Qingshui. I am new here. Can you explain it to me? I don't quite understand. Suli saw the vigilance in his eyes and asked softly. The young practitioner in the purple robe suddenly laughed. I am Dan Zhanghe from the Liang Villa. It is my honor to answer your doubts. Then, Dan Zhanghe told her about the situation in the Juice City. It was not a secret in the three forces. So, there was no need to hide it. I heard that the reason why we can turn the situation around in the Juice City this time is that the Linli building newly joined a peerless senior named Fang Cun. Without his help, I don't know how many years the Blood Circle will be harmed. Dan Zhanghe sighed with emotion. He inadvertently glanced at the center of the street, and his eyes brightened immediately. Look. That is Lord Zhuo of the Linli building. The senior of the Linli building has arrived. Chapter 553. 1 second to remember wonderful pop-up window free reading. Su Li followed Dan Zhanghe's gaze and saw a dozen figures wearing various masks passing through the empty road in front of them. The leader was Su Qinghao wearing a cyan fox mask. They didn't stop and soon disappeared into the gate of the Linli building. Su Li clearly saw a tall and straight figure wearing a square pure white mask. Even if she couldn't see through the mask, she could recognize that it was Feng Yuan. It seems that there is a good tactical matrix master in the Linli building. He acts very fast. Su Li stared at the new mask on Feng Yuan's face thoughtfully. Dan Zhanghe withdrew his gaze and couldn't help but sigh. It's a pity that although I have a good identity in the Raging Sun Villa, I am not qualified to enter the main building. I heard that the seniors of the Linli building don't wear masks in the Linli building. Except for their own people, only the top leaders of the Raging Sun Villa and the Soul Death Valley know their true faces. Su Li nodded slightly and said, "Thank you for your explanation. I have gained a lot today." When Dan Zhanghe heard such a soft voice, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. He blushed and said with a smile, "It's just a small favor. It's not worth mentioning. Miss Qingshui, although I can't enter the main building, I have a small status in the Raging Sun Villa. I got 2 seat cards. I can get close to the sages and mighty seniors. A single word from the almighty figures might be able to give us a sudden flash of insight, allowing our cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. This is a rare opportunity. Now I have 1 more seat card. Would you like to go with me?" After Dan Zhanghe finished speaking, even he himself was very satisfied. It was reasonable, neither servile nor overbearing, and he didn't express any improper thoughts. He thought that the other party wouldn't refuse. Su Li smiled and was about to speak. Suddenly, a voice full of anger came in. "Dan Zhanghe. He." Dan Zhanghe's expression changed slightly. He turned around and was about to leave. But a hand grabbed his back and he couldn't take a step. Su Li's eyes fell on the petite woman with a childish face behind her. She looked slightly strange. It seemed that Dan Zhanghe was a heartless man. Was she accidentally misunderstood? The voice of the petite woman was not low, and it soon attracted the attention of the surrounding practitioners. After a while, the surroundings were filled with people watching the fun. As the saying goes, 3 women make a play. The play of 2 women and a man seems to be even more exciting. "Junior Sister Yuan, why are you here?" Dan Zhanghe's tone was slightly panicked. His eyes flickered as if he had been caught stealing food. Her reaction further confirmed the thoughts of the people around her, and the way they looked at Su Li became subtle. "You still have the cheek to ask me?" The delicate woman was so angry that her pretty face turned pale. Seeing the 2 seat cards in his hands, her chest violently heaved up and down. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. "If I wasn't here, would you have gone to meet this fox spirit? I got the seat card from my father for you, but you actually turned around and went out with this vixen." Only then did Dan Zhanghe realize that he was holding the seat token in his hand. He quickly put it away and swallowed his saliva. "No, junior sister. Listen to me, this lady and I met by chance, but..." The pretty woman sneered and interrupted him. "I heard everything you said when you invited her to sit with you. You still want to quibble? Could it be that a nascent soul stage cultivator like me would have a problem with my ears?" Dan Zhanghe was speechless at once. Seeing this, the pretty woman couldn't help but feel more desperate, and her expression became completely cold. "Dan Zhanghe, you are very good. Yuaning, have been blind all my life to fall in love with a person like you." The pretty woman gnashed her teeth. Suddenly, she turned her head and stared at Su Li with hatred. "It turns out that you like this kind of woman. How can this vixen compare with? She wanted to question the reason of Dan Zhonghe, but suddenly found that the woman in front of her was really better than her in terms of figure and temperament. Although her appearance was covered, it could be seen from her eyes and eyebrows that she must be amazingly beautiful. She was far inferior to her. Yuaning was so angry that her chest suddenly hurt, and even her vision was a little black. A kind of hatred suddenly broke through her reason, so that she didn't consider the consequences at all, and stabbed the flying sword angrily. Bitch, I will teach you a good lesson. Dan Zhonghe suddenly turned pale with fright, and hurriedly shouted, Junior sister apprentice, don't. But he didn't mean to stop her. What was the occasion today? It was a celebration banquet held by the Linli building. No matter what kind of grievances there were, private fights were prohibited here. Junior sister apprentice directly attacked him, which not only disgraced the Linli building, but also disgraced the practitioners in the whole Ju city. She really made a big trouble. How dare he get involved in the trouble? It was better to be wise to protect himself. Anyway, after this misunderstanding, Yuaning would not be his cultivation companion. The loss outweighed the gain. While Dan Zhonghe was calculating in his heart, the people around also reacted. In an instant, everyone stepped back for fear of being involved in the trouble. A female practitioner who has lost her mind is really terrible. She completely disregards the consequences. Someone in the crowd sighed and said sarcastically, I know her. She is the only daughter of the fourth elder of the Liang villa. This sword will hurt the fourth elder badly. Ding! Su Li casually tilted her head and easily dodged the flying sword. Yuan Ying's pretty face changed, and she was about to control the flying sword to change direction. But Su Li smiled. She didn't move, but the flying sword was caught by two white and soft fingers, and couldn't move. You even have a higher cultivation than me. Yuaning was shocked, and her little face instantly turned pale. She had been cherished by her father since she was a child. She was arrogant. Among the young female practitioners in Juqing, even if her cultivation was not at the top, it was extremely high. But now it was easily controlled by a female practitioner who she had never seen before. Little girl. Su Li's tone was leisurely, without any anger. Her bearing alone made Yuaning feel that she had lost again. I'll give you a word of advice. You should be careful when choosing a Dao companion, and don't choose one from a pile of trash. Instead of flying into a rage out of humiliation, why don't you teach some treacherous men a good lesson, just like this? Yuaning was slightly stunned. Then she heard Dan Zhonghe, who was watching from the sidelines, suddenly scream, and there was blood between his legs. Hiss! Seeing this, all the male practitioners gasped and stepped back a few more steps at the same time. Breaking a man's leg easily. What a ruthless female practitioner. Looking at Dan Zhonghe's bloody lower body, Yuaning was instantly stunned. Why was the development of the situation different from what she had imagined? Sister. Are you also deceived by him? Her eyes suddenly brightened, and the original hostility suddenly disappeared. Su Li chuckled and shook her head. Sister, I'm new here, and I just met Child Dan today. What? Yuan Ying's eyes widened. Did she really misunderstand? However, you didn't misunderstand him. There are at least 5 different numas of Yin Yuan in his body, so... Su Li covered her mouth and whispered, I castrated him for you. 5 numas of Yin. Yuan Ying's body trembled as she listened. So the one she liked was this kind of trash. How dare you? Her eyes were slightly red. She tremblingly pulled out the flying sword from Su Li's hand, and immediately stabbed at Dan Zhonghe with the sword. I'll kill you. Puff! Dan Zhonghe didn't expect that Yuaning would suddenly attack him. The sword pierced through his pubic region. He stared blankly at the flying sword inserted into his body. A sense of weakness soon overwhelmed him. His pubic region collapsed, and he died. He's dead. Yuaning came to her senses and realized that she had made a big trouble. She was not afraid of killing people, and Dan Zhanghe's background was not as good as hers. But the trouble was, they were at the gate of the Linli building. He's dead. Go and inform the Linli building. Yuaning really made a big trouble this time. Yuan Ying's face was pale, and she didn't even have the strength to escape. Her home was in Juice City. Where could she escape to? Suddenly, she remembered something and transmitted the sound to Su Li. Sister, run away. You just came to Juice City, and the people of the Linli building certainly don't know you. If you run away, I'll be the only one to die. It's not a loss. Su Li was slightly stunned, and then she couldn't help laughing. This girl seemed to have a strange way of thinking. Seeing that Su Li laughed, Yuaning thought that Su Li didn't believe it. She immediately became anxious. Sister, I'm serious. You are not from Juice City, and you don't know how terrible the Linli building is. Who dares to kill people at the banquet? How dare you? All of a sudden, a loud roar came from afar and rapidly approached them. Yuaning held her breath slightly, and she was so nervous that her whole body collapsed. Suddenly, a warm hand patted her on the back. Yuaning looked back blankly and saw Su Li's warm eyes. Somehow, she calmed down a lot. Soon, a practitioner of the Linli building walked over with a majestic gait. When he saw Dan Zhongping lying in a pool of blood, he suddenly stopped and looked up at the crowd sharply. Who did it? Everyone turned their eyes to the two girls standing in the field. When the practitioner of the Linli building saw Su Li and Yuaning, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then he returned to normal quickly and said sternly, Today, the Linli building forbids fighting at the banquet. Anyone who violates it will be killed. Do you know your crime? Death without mercy. Yuaning was shocked, and her mind was blank. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Ho ho, a soft chuckle came from the black veil. You are not my opponent. Let the leader of the Linli building come out. It's easy to deal with this matter. As soon as the words came out, everyone was silent. The practitioner of the Linli building was stunned for a moment and said in astonishment, What did you say? At this moment, in the lobby of the Linli building, the senior leaders of the three forces gathered together, which was very lively. And the protagonist of this banquet was undoubtedly Fang Yuan. Senior Fang Cun helped us out of righteousness this time. He should be respected by all of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lord Fang Cun, I propose a toast to you. After a round of toasts, Fang Yuan absent-mindedly put down the wine cup. In the past few days, he had been thinking about the words of the bloody mist when he was in a daze. The hazy picture also flashed back again and again. Is the daughter of luck her, or, there was only one daughter of luck in the world? If there was a new daughter of luck, it meant that Su Li was really gone. But that figure. If it was not her, why did she save us? Fang Yuan was extremely contradictory. He carefully inquired about the process, but only got the news that he, Ling Mo, and Buwang inexplicably appeared in front of the headquarters of the Linli building. As for who saved them and sent them back, no one saw it. As his thoughts were entangled, the wine cup was empty unconsciously. When Fang Yuan was about to pour another cup, he saw a manservant of the Linli building rushing in and said in a panic, Lord Zhua, someone is making trouble at the door. Steward Lin is no match and was caught. Chapter 554. Male? What? Hearing the manservant's words, everyone present was stunned and even didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now the Linli building was at its peak. How dare someone make trouble at the gate of the Linley building? Did he want to die? Please enjoy. I'll go out and have a look. Su Qinghao got up and put on the mask in his arms. Then he flashed out of the lobby. The lobby became lively again. No one took the disturbance outside seriously. But after half an hour, Su Qingtian finally noticed that something was wrong. He frowned and went out of the courtyard without saying a word. Fang Yuan was a little upset. Seeing Su Qingtian go out, he also got up. At the same time, he transmitted the sound to Ling Mo, who was about to get up, come to preside over the situation. I'll go out and have a look. By the way, I can get some fresh air. Ling Mo sat down again. He glanced at Su Buwang, who was eating and drinking at the opposite table and didn't care about the situation. Ling Mo shook his head slightly. After today, Ling Mo had to discipline this guy. Otherwise, if he went out with the identity of the young lord, he would not only lose the face of the Linley building, but also his mother. When Su Qingtian went out of the Linley building, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. The seats outside were dead silent. After he came out, everyone's eyes fell on him. It's Lord Qing. This time, Lord Qing took action. The demon girl should be arrogant to the extreme. Hearing the whispers, Su Qingtan's heart sank slightly. Something happened to Qinghao. What's the matter? Fang Yuan also frowned when he saw the scene. Su Qingtian shook his head and pointed to one of the banquets. Let's go and have a look. When they started, all the practitioners immediately made way for them, pointing to the center of the street in front of the Linley building. This is the first-class seat. What is Qinghao doing? Su Qingtian was more and more puzzled. When he got closer, he finally saw a strange and harmonious scene. There were only 4 people sitting in this seat, 2 men and 2 women. One of them was Su Qinghao. Eat, you 3. How can you waste the delicious food? Today is the time for eating. It's not worth it to be delayed by my affairs. During the dinner, the woman with a black veil on her face smiled sweetly. She picked up the chopsticks and put a dish in Su Qinghao's bowl. Su Qinghao felt humiliated, shocked and angry. He couldn't move and could only watch Su Li's movements. Not long after he came out, he learned of the details. Today, someone killed a woman in the street in front of the Linley building. But when he followed the manservant to the table, he saw that Steward Lin and the woman were sitting at the same table. When he was about to scold him, he found that he couldn't control his body and also sat at the table. How is this possible? Even though my cultivation level is lower than Big Brother's, I'm still a deity transformation cultivator, yet I'm so easily restrained. I can't even notify Big Brother and the others. After a while, he saw Su Qingtian and Fang Yuan coming together, and he couldn't help but feel happy. Great! Got it! Big Brother and Big Brother Fang came together. Big Brother Fang was able to destroy the blood world. No matter how demonic this woman is, she is definitely not a match for Big Brother Fang. Yuaning saw Fang Yuan's mask and recognized his identity. She suddenly felt bitter in her heart. In the end, he still couldn't escape death. Su Qingtian quickly saw the clue and said in a cold voice, "Your Excellency, this time, did you?" Before Su Qingtian finished his words, he was interrupted by Su Li, "Fellow practitioner Fang, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect that I should call you Lord Fang Cun when I see you again." Su Li put down the chopsticks, looked at Fang Yuan and chuckled. Su Qingtian suddenly paused and turned to transmit the sound in silence. "Do you know each other?" Fang Yuan nodded slightly. Before Su Qingtian transmitted the sound in silence again, he was silent for a moment and said, "Is it, we meet again? Fellow practitioner Fang, why don't you invite me to have a seat inside? Could it be that fellow Daoist thinks that a table of first-class banquets can beat me? Su Li interrupted Fang Yuan's question and glanced at Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan. Su Qinghao suddenly relaxed and the invisible inhibition faded away. He quickly jumped behind Su Qingtan. Big brother Fang, this woman's means are evil, and her purpose is unknown. Be careful. As soon as Su Qinghao transmitted the sound in silence, he saw Fang Yuan nodded and said, I really neglected you. How about having a talk on the top floor? As soon as the words came out, everyone was shocked on the spot. Yuaning was even more dumbfounded. She didn't expect that there would be such a turn of events. Lord Fang Cun came over and didn't denounce her. Instead, he invited this sister to the top floor of the Linli building. What was her background? Fang Yuan, you know better than anyone else what the top floor is like. How can you take a girl of unknown origin up there? Su Qingtan also felt that it was inappropriate and transmitted the sound in silence in a hurry. But Fang Yuan turned a deaf ear. Su Li's eyes flashed and she said softly, my pleasure. Then, she got up and walked to Fang Yuan, I didn't mean to offend you today. There is a reason for it. Don't embarrass the sister. I see. Fang Yuan nodded slightly. Even though Su Qinghao and Su Qingtan had thousands of doubts in their hearts, they had to keep silent. Since the words had been spoken, it was hard to take them back. It was inappropriate for him to say no. The so-called rules only restricted the weak. Obviously, this woman was not weak. It was just a small matter to compensate the Liang villa. Please. Fang Yuan turned sideways and gestured with his hand. Su Li bowed slightly to express her gratitude. Then they stepped into the gate of the Linli building. All the people in the lobby saw that Fang Yuan and others came back with a strange woman. The lively atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Su Buwang, who was still eating and drinking, felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw Su Li. His eyes suddenly brightened. He stood up and shouted, Sister Qingshui. Hearing this name, Su Qingtan and Su Qinghao were slightly shocked. It turned out that she was Qingshui who saved Su Buwang in the blood tide. No wonder Fang Yuan's attitude towards her was so subtle. Even if she saved Buwang's life, she shouldn't go to the top floor. Su Qingtan couldn't figure it out. Su Buwang had already pulled Su Li to take a seat and said, Sister Qingshui, where have you been these days? I thought you had left the Yinyang region. Su Li glanced at Fang Yuan, who took off his mask and was expressionless. She smiled sweetly and said, I went to deal with some private affairs. I haven't finished them yet. I thought of your safety halfway, so I came back to have a look. Su Buwang was stunned and moved in his heart. No one had ever cared about him so blatantly. For a moment, he felt a little uncomfortable. He blushed and whispered, Sister, I will be embarrassed if you say so. Su Li smiled and said nothing. She looked at other young people sitting at the table. Seeing her glance, everyone showed respect and nodded slightly. Although Su Buwang was still sitting on the side, they had already been hinted that this seemingly unreliable young man was the future owner of the Linli building. And they were the trusted subordinates selected by Ling Mo and others to follow Su Buwang. They naturally had to respect those whom Su Buwang respected. With Su Li's wisdom and experience, she could see the details of these young practitioners at a glance. She couldn't help but squint and praise, You are all a group of good children. I propose a toast to you. Take good care of my brother Buwang in the future. As she said, Su Li picked up the wine cup and drank it up. Everyone was slightly shocked and they heard the words. They hurriedly stood up and also picked up the wine cup and drank it up. Senior, you don't have to do this. We will do our best. Senior, bottoms up. After one round, the atmosphere at the table immediately became harmonious. Su Buwang scratched his head. Although he didn't understand why this sister Qing Shui was so kind to him, the feeling of being cared for by the elders still made him feel warm in his heart. Although Fang Yuan sat in the main seat, his attention was always on the side seats. Seeing this scene, he sighed secretly. After all, men were not as meticulous as women. He never thought of helping Su Buwang to get familiar with the confidants. At this moment, Chiu Ruhai, the owner of the Liang Villa in the main seat, picked up the wine cup and said with a smile, "Lord Fang Cun, I'm curious. May I ask you the origin of the woman who came in just now? Didn't you say that something happened at the door just now?" Fang Yuan raised his eyes and looked at Chiu Ruhai. His indifferent eyes immediately made the latter feel cold. "Ha!" Su Qingtan smoothed things over and took over the topic. "Fang Cun is indifferent in nature and not good at talking. Let me answer your question. Speaking of this, it has something to do with the Lord." Speaking of this, Su Qingtan transmitted the sound in silence. No one knew what he said, but Chiu Ruhai's face suddenly changed. Then he closed his mouth and no longer talked about the accident. The banquet lasted for a long time, and it didn't end after half a day. Every minute and every second was suffering for Fang Yuan, who wanted to know the answer. But for Su Buwang, it was an extremely pleasant chat time. During the banquet, he roughly told his encounter in the blood world. He didn't hide anything from the kind sister who saved his life several times. "So, you got the memory about mother and then became the young lord of the Linli building? This is truly worthy of celebration." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly and transmitted the sound in silence with a faint smile. "Oh. Sister Qing Shui, don't laugh at me." Su Buwang looked distressed and complained, "I don't know whether those memories are true or not and whether Uncle Fang is lying to me again. And with my cultivation, how can I be the young lord? Those young lords of the big forces all have deep foundations and are invincible at the same level. I'm not afraid to laugh at you. In the past 1,000 years, I have no trump card except cultivation. Uncle Fang's background is also sensitive. I don't know any of the skills he knows." Su Li listened and laughed. She continued to transmit the sound in silence. "If you are worried about this, I can teach you. I promise that you will not be worse than any talent." Su Buwang only thought that Su Li was joking and waved his hand. "Sister, don't tease me. Besides, even if I can be the young lord, I don't want to." "Then why?" Su Li's words were always with a gentle smile, which made Su Buwang unconsciously relaxed. He said all the words in his heart to Su Li without missing a word. Those memories, whether they are true or false. Su Buwang looked serious and looked at Su Li. "I don't want to be tied here by an identity. I want to go to Zhuzhou region and have a look." Chapter 555. Su Li was slightly stunned. After thinking for a while, she replied with a chuckle, "Silly brother, can't you be the young lord and go to Zhuzhou region? If you are the young lord of the Linli building, you will have enough resources. If they ask you to stay in Ju City, can't you run away? In this way, you will have the resources for practice and your wish can be realized. Isn't it a win-win situation?" Su Buwang was stunned. Was there such an operation? Then he thought about it. What Sister Qing Shui said was unconventional, but it seemed that there was a lot of room for operation. Su Li stopped talking and held the wine cup to taste carefully. Her eyes were always on Su Buwang. She couldn't get enough of him. After a whole day, the banquet of the Linli building came to an end. "Fellow practitioner Qing, I will give you an explanation for Dan Zhanghe's matter today. I'm leaving now." Chiu Ruhai slightly cupped his hands, and Su Qingtan smiled back. This was the confidence of the first force in Ju City. Regardless of the specific matter today, he only needed to tell Chiao Ruhai that the source of the trouble was the people of the Raging Sun Villa. After the head of the Raging Sun Villa and the people of the Suihun Valley bid farewell to each other, the practitioners outside almost dispersed, leaving only some manservants of the Linli building to clean up the mess. Fong Yuan turned his head and stared at Su Li, who was still sitting next to Su Buwang. Sensing his gaze, Su Li tilted her head and smiled. "Fellow practitioner Fong, please lead the way." After a while, Su Li pushed open the door of the top floor of the Linli building and walked in. Su Buwang, Fong Yuan, Ling Mo, Su Qingtan and others followed her. It seems that no one has been here for a long time, although it is very clean. Su Li's fingertips swept across the tea table beside the table. She twisted it and found no dust. Fong Yuan vaguely observed Su Li's every work and said calmly, "This room is specially prepared for distinguished guests. Few distinguished guests come to the Linli building, so we don't use it much." Su Li was stunned and couldn't help laughing. "How can I be a distinguished guest? Fellow practitioner Fong is so polite." Then she glanced at the others and continued, "Not only fellow practitioner Fong, but also the fellow practitioners of the Linli building are so enthusiastic. I'm really flattered that so many people come here." Hearing this, Su Qingtan suddenly laughed and said, "We are just curious. Fong Cun has never been close to women. What kind of person can make Fong Cun treat her like this? Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint fellow Daoist Qing. I'm just an ordinary rogue cultivator. I've never given my life to any power." Su Li's understatement made Fong Yuan frown slightly. He was well aware of this woman's strength. It was hard to believe that she was a rogue cultivator. After a while, everyone sat down at the same time. Fong Yuan intentionally or unintentionally vacated Su Li's favorite seat. Su Li's eyes flashed vaguely. She didn't look at the empty seat and sat in the guest seat next to Fong Yuan. After the maid served the spiritual tea, the room was silent for a moment. Fong Yuan suddenly spoke and broke the silence. "You were the one who killed the blood mist man from the blood world." Everyone was shocked by his words. Su Li curled her lips and looked at Fong Yuan's complicated eyes. She said faintly, "So what? It's not me." "So what?" Fong Yuan held his breath slightly. He subconsciously recalled the shout of the blood mist man in a daze. The daughter of luck, his eyes were unprecedentedly tangled. The daughter of luck only existed in the world. If the latter was alive, the former must be dead. Was it, you or not? There was only a difference of one word between yes and no, but it was related to the last hope in his heart. After a few suffocating breaths, Fong Yuan relaxed his tense body and slowly said in a low voice, "If it was you, the Linli building would try our best to satisfy your request in Jueching to repay your great kindness. If it was not you, I would not embarrass you even if I thought too much. I just ask you to give me an answer." After he said this, the room fell into silence again. Su Li picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. She slowly glanced at the people present. Ling Mo, the eldest brother, the fourth brother, Yun Yi and others, plus Fong Yuan, were all the seniors of the Linli building now. She had known a lot of secrets from Su Buwang. Who was the mysterious person who urged Ling Mo to rebuild the Linli building? However, she couldn't ask this question. If she asked with the same purpose as Fong Yuan, it would inevitably make everyone doubt her identity. However, there was no danger of exposing other questions. "I heard that there is a Lord Luo in the Linli building. Why haven't I seen him?" Su Li didn't answer but asked. "Luo?" Fong Yuan was puzzled. He moved his eyes away and fell on Ling Mo. Ling Mo's eyes flashed and he admitted, "There is indeed a Lord Luo in the Linli building. You just came here. How do you know? I just inquired about it casually. The names of the seniors of your sect are not secrets, are they? What you said is right. Su Qingtan stopped Ling Mo, who frowned and said in a calm tone, Luo is just an honorary protector of the Linli building. After he was seriously injured in the bloody world, he woke up and left. We don't know his specific whereabouts. Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows and said, I see. No wonder she didn't see a similar person in the final battle of the bloody world. Was it Luo Yichen who left with Mei Ruhan? What you want to know, I have told you truthfully with full sincerity. Su Qingtan continued with a hint of coercion in his eyes. What's your answer? Do you want my answer? Su Li smiled meaningfully. It's very simple. I want an honorary protector position, just like Luo. I will tell you what you want to know. Fang Yuan looked at Su Li and was slightly stunned. What the woman said in the inn turned out to be true. She wanted to join the Linli building. Sister, will you also join the Linli building? That's great. Su Buwang's eyes suddenly brightened. Seeing that Ling Mo and others were still hesitating, he became serious and snorted, Don't you want me to be the young lord? If you are here, I can promise you. If you are not here, I don't want to be the young lord. As soon as he said that, everyone couldn't help but be silent. Even Fang Yuan faintly felt sad. When did this silly boy and Qing Shui have such a good relationship? It's not difficult. After a moment of silence, Ling Mo said solemnly, You are willing to destroy the bloody world. You come with good intentions and do us a great favor. From today on, you are the second honorary protector of the Linli building. Your status is equal to ours. You can stay or leave at will. What do you think? Su Qingtan pondered for a moment and looked up. I have no objection. Su Qinghao smiled happily. I listen to you. Yun Yi scratched his head and said, You can make the decision. Fang Yuan nodded and looked back to Su Li. He asked, Are you satisfied? The atmosphere suddenly became faintly tense. Ho ho, Su Li chuckled and took off the black veil, revealing a delicate and pretty face. Then she stood up and bowed slightly. Colleagues, Qing Shui is here to greet you. Seeing Su Li's face, Fang Yuan and others were surprised and doubtful. She was too young. She was definitely younger than Buwang, but her cultivation was stronger than his. It was extremely unreasonable. As for what fellow practitioner Fang wants to ask. Su Li turned over her hand, and the opposing blood bead appeared in her palm, faintly revealing bloody luster. Su Buwang subconsciously clutched his chest, and his eyes were a little confused. This thing. When Fang Yuan and Ling Mo saw this thing, they were all shocked. It was the bloody light embedded in Su Buwang's chest. Because of this thing, you were defeated. Although Su Li didn't say it clearly, taking out this thing was obviously a tacit agreement. In order not to forget my brother, I took this thing and did some investigation. This thing is called the opposing blood bead. Do you have any impression of it? Fang Yuan's eyes flashed with bitterness. After a few moments of silence, he barely kept calm. After thinking for a moment, he said, There are fragmentary records in the classics of the sect. This is an ancient treasure, but, yes. Su Li smiled and looked at Fang Yuan. Fellow practitioner Fang is really from a famous sect. You can even recognize such a treasure from a long time ago. The opposing blood bead was an evil treasure in ancient times. It has been destroyed for a long time. This thing is just a replica. Others were confused. Even Ling Mo had never heard of the opposing blood bead. He could only listen on the side and couldn't get a word in. Fang Yuan shook his head slightly and said seriously, Compared with fellow practitioner Qing Shui, I am far inferior. No one can find out the name of this thing in a short time except fellow practitioner Qing Shui. Su Li chuckled, I'm just lucky. Since it is an evil treasure. Su Buwang couldn't help but interrupt, why is it here? From childhood to adulthood, I have never taken anything from Xingtian Shrine except for this. As he said, he rolled up his sleeves, and a pattern appeared. This is Young Jade Mask. Ling Mo's pupils shrank, and his figure flashed in front of Su Buwang in an instant. He looked a little excited. Su Buwang looked at Ling Mo with some astonishment. In his impression, this elder always had a cold face, and his temperament was even colder than Uncle Fang. Why was he so excited when he saw the mask? This was given to me by the mammy who took care of me since I was a child. Later, she died, and I kept it as a souvenir. Su Buwang explained, but Ling Mo couldn't help but laugh happily after hearing it. I knew it. You in the reincarnation mirror is the real you. Were what you did in the past a smokescreen? What Mammy's relic was just a cover deliberately set by Ling Li. You killed your own son, deceived everyone, and even let Su Buwang hate you. Who are you acting for? What are you afraid of? Ling Li. Ling Mo had a lot of thoughts. Su Buwang carefully rolled up his sleeves. He really didn't understand. Although there was a general memory in the bloodstone, many details were missing, and the yin-yang jade mask was not mentioned. So he couldn't understand what Yang Jade Mask meant. The appearance of the Yang Jade Mask and Su Buwang's words. Such a huge flaw made everyone fall into silence. So, was he the person who set up the Linli building? Su Li held her chin and looked at the silent crowd. She was thoughtful, but her eyes were extremely cold. In any case, the sufferings of Wang in these years should be counted on him. She not only wanted to investigate the secret of Xingtian Shrine, but also those culprits in the past. None of them could escape. Chapter 556. There are not many pictures recorded in this thing, but it is very interesting. Since it was left to him by Su Buwang's biological mother. Su Li flicked her fingers, and the opposing blood bead turned into a bloody light and fell into Su Buwang's hand. She said meaningfully, it is returned to its original owner. Hearing this, Fang Yuan's pupils shrank slightly. You said that the opposing blood bead not only passed the memory to Buwang, but also recorded the previous pictures. Su Li nodded with a smile, of course. Otherwise, how can I know the news of the owner of this thing? Su Buwang was a little confused. His divine awareness subconsciously integrated into the opposing blood bead, and he immediately saw many details that he had ignored before, including the yin-yang jade face, and his mother finally gave everything to him, including the opposing blood bead and her life. It turns out that the yin-yang jade face is the token of love he gave to my mother. Su Buwang was inexplicably depressed. He always thought that the man had never regarded him as a son, but now he found that there was a subtle discrepancy with his image in the past. Buwang, can I have a look? Su Buwang came to his senses and saw everyone's nervous expression. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand to show the picture. After 1,000 years, everything that happened in the center of the tactical matrix of Tianjue covering hundreds of meters was finally revealed. Su Li's choice, Su Li's quarrel with Qi Xianqing and others. Everything was trivial, and even the conversation could be faintly distinguished from the mouth shape. Everyone couldn't help but stand up and stare at the picture in the image. Only Su Li sat on one side, holding her chin. She seemed to be a little bored, but there was a slight light flashing at the bottom of her eyes. The image projected at this moment was not the original one of the opposing blood bead, but the memory she put in later. The image was very short. After 10 minutes, the picture disappeared. There was silence in the room. Everyone had different expressions, but without exception, they all had a trace of sadness. Feng Yuan took a deep breath and said, "There is only the opposing blood bead left in Wang's body. His spiritual root can only be said to be medium. The foundation of the tactical matrix of Tianjue is gone. It seems that someone has done something to it." "What kind of place is Xingtian Shrine?" Su Qinghao sighed. Su Buwang smiled foolishly. "I only know that it is full of blood, and people die every day. I don't like it at all. The memory of the opposing blood bead is incomplete." After that, Su Li disappeared and didn't appear until the reincarnation mirror broke. Where did she go? Ling Mo frowned tightly. The mystery of Su Li's life was still unsolved. Master left everything to Little Master. She doesn't have many days left to live. She probably found a place with no one around. Yuni choked with sobs, and he couldn't continue. At this point, no one was in the mood to continue chatting. They all cupped their fists and left in twos and threes. Su Buwang sat in place in a daze, and his eyes were a little confused. He came out to find his mother, but in the end, this was the result. Next, what should he live for? Su Li got up and walked to the door. She looked back at Su Buwang and paused for a few seconds. Finally, she made up her mind and turned to go out. She didn't dare to comfort Su Buwang for fear that she would tell him if she couldn't bear it. But that wasn't a good thing for everyone. Fate Su. Su Li's eyes were cold. She went downstairs while thinking. She saw Haydn and others busy with all kinds of files. Seeing Su Li coming, Haydn came to her and saluted. He said with a smile, "Are you the new Lord Qingshui?" Su Li nodded slightly. She pointed to the file in his hand and said, "Can I have a look?" "Of course." Haydn quickly handed over the file. Su Li took it and looked at it. She was surprised. It's the format of Tianyik. Our intelligence agency of the Linli building imitates Tianyik. Haydn said proudly, "No one can imitate the intelligence system of Tianyik since ancient times. Our Linli building is the first." "Then where did you learn this intelligence system?" Su Li smiled faintly. Haydn was speechless. He didn't know, but this woman just joined the Linli building. It was not appropriate to tell her. "Well, I won't embarrass you." Haydn didn't answer, and Su Li didn't care. After returning the file to him, she said casually, "How much information have you collected about the Tianzhou battle?" Seeing that she changed the question, Haydn breathed a sigh of relief and said quickly, "The Tianzhou battle will start in a month or two. We also attach great importance to it and try our best to collect information." As he said, a manservant brought up a whole plate of jade slips and put it on the small table in front of Su Li. "These are all. Lord Qingshui, you can sit down and read them slowly." Su Li responded. Haydn saluted and left. Then he turned to do his own business. Su Li sat down, picked up 2 jade slips and glanced at them casually. She looked thoughtful. These were indeed the information of the Tianzhou battle, and they were the same as what Xianan said at the beginning. The information was more detailed, but seeing that Haydn was on guard against her, these jade slips were definitely not all. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and released her divine awareness. In the blink of an eye, she scanned all the information on the jade plate into her mind. She was in the nature's soul realm, so she naturally didn't need to read slowly like other practitioners. After sorting out the information for a moment, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and a black light flashed in her eyes. "Is it set on September 15th? There are still 1.5 months left." At dinner time, Su Li received an invitation from Feng Yuan and came to the attic in the back hall. As soon as she entered the room, she smelled the fragrance of food from the spiritual chef. "Sister, you are here. Today is a welcome banquet for you. Su Buwang walked over and smiled a little reluctantly. Su Li smiled gently, touched his hair, and walked in. Fang Yuan, Ling Mo and others were already there, and the host's seat was empty. Fellow Daoist Qing Shui, today is your banquet. Please take a seat. Su Qingtan said slowly. Su Li nodded with a smile without any bashfulness. She sat in the middle naturally, and Fang Yuan and Su Buwang were on her left and right sides. Su Li picked up the wine cup and stood up. It's my honor to enter the Linli building today. I propose a toast to you first. She raised her head and drank up. Then she poured the wine cup and glanced at everyone. And to you, after 1,000 years, you are still fighting for me. Fellow Daoist Qing Shui is really straightforward. I also propose a toast. Yun Yi raised his cup and drank up happily. It was rare to see such a clever and straightforward female practitioner in the cultivation circle. What's more, this person's cultivation was so high that she was stronger than anyone present. This reminded him of his master at that time, to Miss Qing Shui. Fang Yuan raised his cup. To you. Ling Mo's eyes were sincere. At least at this moment, they really needed to thank each other. To Sister Qing Shui for saving my life many times. With gratitude in his eyes, Su Buwang drank up the wine with both hands. Su Li smiled and drank a few more cups. She faintly had a feeling of returning to the past. But the past was the past after all. After a round, she put down the wine cup and said in a relaxed tone, I don't know, what do you think of the Tianzhou battle? Tianzhou battle. Su Qinghao seemed to think of something, and his eyes lit up slightly. May I ask how old you are, fellow Daoist Qing Shui? Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and said with a chuckle, within 1,000 years, more than enough to participate in this Tianzhou battle. Wow! Su Buwang widened his eyes and looked at Su Li incredulously. Sister Qing Shui, you are even younger than me. It's incredible. There are always people in the world who can't be judged by common sense. Ling Mo put down the wine cup and stared at Su Li with burning eyes. In the cultivation circle, this kind of people are usually called evildoers, who are even above the talents. Qing Shui, are you an evildoer? As Ling Mo's words fell, the atmosphere at the table became subtle, and everyone looked at Su Li differently. A living evildoer was simply a miracle. Fang Yuan looked serious, and his eyes fell on Su Li's delicate side face. The word evildoer was more like a legend in today's cultivation circle. It was said that those horrible existences who could become emperors in ancient times were all extraordinary since childhood, and they showed extremely horrible cultivation talents and speed. Among them, the great emperor of Lihan was the most evildoer. It was said that when he was born, the whole world was dyed blue, and the starry sky fell with rolling tides, as if the universe was turned upside down, which was really shocking. Later, the great emperor of Lihan built foundation at the age of 3, reached Yuanying realm at the age of 7, reached the realm of nature's test at the age of 30, and stepped into the realm of junior emperor at the age of 45. After that, in just 5 years, he broke through to the realm of great emperor, and became the youngest emperor in the history of Qing Shui circle. After that, Qing Shui circle ushered in the reign of the great emperor of Lihan for nearly 10,000 years, and the calendar was changed to Qing Shui. Since then, nothing had changed. Evildoer. Su Li tucked her hair behind her ears and smiled shyly. If you say so, I will be shy. Although I have some talent, I am still far from being an evildoer. As soon as Su Li said this, the atmosphere suddenly eased a lot. Ling Mo slightly relaxed his eyebrows. The appearance of an evildoer was always accompanied by disasters. The Linli building struggled to survive for nearly 1,000 years. Now it just got better, but it couldn't stand the torment. Fellow Daoist Qingshui, to tell you the truth. Su Qingtan's voice was clear and bright. He cupped his hands and said, "We did arrange a lot of spies to participate in the Tianzhou battle, but all the talents of Qingshui's circle gathered there. We have no chance to snatch the luck from those holy sects, and we need a leader. Now, if you are willing to go, it will be the best." "Yes." Su Qinghao followed his brother's words and nodded cautiously. "If you are willing to go, few people in the entire Qingshui circle can compete with you with your strength. It will be easy for you to win the first place." Speaking of this, Su Qinghao was suddenly stunned. What was the difference between the number one of the talents and an evildoer? Su Li slightly narrowed her eyes and showed a look of contemplation. After a while, she raised her head and said slowly, "I know that your identities are sensitive, and I am unfamiliar with you. Even if I show my face in front of those holy sects, no one knows who I am. It happens that I haven't been to Xingxian Mountain, and I am very interested in it. So, I agree. But..." Su Li's eyes suddenly became sharp, and she glanced at the crowd. "All the secrets about the Tianzhou battle, I hope all the former talents of holy sects can tell me truthfully. I never do things that I am not sure about." Chapter 557. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. "I promise you." Fang Yuan, who had been silent for a long time, finally said, "We come from various holy sects, and the records of the Tianzhou battle are almost the same. But since you want to know all, we will tell you all we know." It seemed that this woman was not from a holy sect. Ling Mo's eyes flashed. He figured it out and relaxed. Since he wasn't from the sage sect, it was unlikely that he was their enemy. Furthermore, which enemy would allow such an outstanding cultivator to be a spy? If he was the sect master of the sage sect, he would hide such a person as fast as he could. How could he expose him in advance? "That's good." Su Li squinted and chuckled. After the banquet, Su Li was led by a manservant to live in the boutique house of the Linli building, Qingshui Garden. The name of the house was newly changed. It was originally uninhabited. The real estate in Ju City was very rare, but it was not difficult for the Linli building. Su Li followed the manservant to walk around the yard. The yard was not big, but it was very clean. The floor made of low-level spiritual wood was so bright that it could be seen in a mirror. Walking into the central hall, Su Li was slightly satisfied with the elegant layout. She sat down on the soft couch and said softly, "You can leave." "Yes." The manservant quickly saluted and left. Only Su Li was left in the room. She waved her hand, and 8 jade slips of different sizes appeared in the air. These were the jade slips of the Tianzhou battle that Fang Yuan and others gave to her. What was the difference between the Tianzhou battle in the records of the holy sects? She believed that no one had tried to gather the records of many holy sects before her. This was the unique advantage of the Linli building. Taking a jade slip, Su Li immersed her divine awareness in it. After a while, the jade slips burned into ashes. Su Li slowly closed her eyes, and a lot of information was integrated in her mind. After a while, Su Li suddenly opened her eyes, and her eyes were gloomy. The records of the holy sects were indeed different. Fang Yuan came from the top holy sect, so the information should be the most complete. But the details were also different from those of other holy sections. However, no matter how different they were, they all mentioned the same person. The great emperor of Lihan. Su Li narrowed her long and narrow eyes slightly. It was not the first time for her to hear this name, but her understanding of the great emperor was only limited to his name. It was not until now that he knew that the calendar of Qingshui's circle changed because he was born with a strange phenomenon. It turned out that he was the first great emperor since ancient times. Great Emperor Lihan had two great treasures, the Lihan sword and the Lihan tablet. Both of them were supreme treasures. However, after Great Emperor Lihan fell, these two treasures were not left behind. Instead, they disappeared. Why? The message left by Fang Yuan flashed in Su Li's mind. The cultivation world had no lack of mysteries. The history of the prodigy role is even longer than that of Emperor Lihan. I don't even know who left the Black Lotus behind, but it actually has a trace of the Heavenly Way's karmic luck, which is distributed to the prodigies according to their ranking on the prodigy roll, protecting them from dying prematurely. It sounds like it's a magic treasure left behind by a powerful sect to nurture their disciples during the Age of All Spirits. It can steal karmic luck from the Heavenly Way. Her soft laughter echoed in the room. Interesting. Time passed unconsciously. More than a month had passed in the blink of an eye. In the past month, Su Li spent most of her time wandering in the Linli building. When she encountered any injustice, she would help. She won the favor of many disciples of the Linli building. Ling Mo and others were also much closer to her. Qing Shui, it's almost time. On this day, Ling Mo found Su Li and said in a serious tone, "We still have time to meet with the members outside." Su Li nodded gently. She looked at the clothes of the Linli building she wore and said, "I'm going to change clothes. You take advantage of this time to summon the disciples who are going there." Ling Mo responded, and a touch of worry flashed in his eyes. All the holy sects in the entire Qing Shui circle gathered in the Xingxian mountain. If Qing Shui's identity was exposed, the consequences would be unimaginable. On the other side, Su Li returned to her residence and just changed into the original heavy soul robe and put on the veil. Su Buwang broke in. "Sister." Su Li's eyes flashed with tenderness, and she said in a teasing tone, "Our young lord is here." "I'm Qing Shui." "Greetings, young lord." "Oh, sister. You are still joking at this time." Su Buwang's face was slightly red. "Are you leaving now?" "To the Xingxian mountain." Su Li nodded slightly. "It's less than half a month before the start of the Tianzhou battle. It's time to go." "Sister," Su Buwang looked worried. Even if his sister's cultivation was extremely strong, there were many strong people there. The Linli building was full of enemies. His sister couldn't fight against so many people. This trip was extremely dangerous. "Don't worry, little fool." Su Li approached and lowered her head to adjust Su Buwang's collar. "Sister, you know what kind of place the Xingxian mountain is. Since the natural law is covered there, the deduction skill can't work. As long as you hide your strength, you don't have to worry." Su Buwang responded in a muffled voice. After hesitating for a moment, he took off the young jade mask on his arm and put it in Su Li's palm. "Sister, this thing can be integrated into the face and change the appearance. No matter how advanced the pupil's skill is, no one can find the abnormality. I can rest assured if you take it." Su Li was stunned. Looking at the familiar and strange young jade mask in her hand, she was silent for a moment, and suddenly laughed with a faint light in her eyes. "Okay, sister, take it." In the front hall of the Linli building, Fang Yuan sat quietly on one side of the table. Ling Mo stood in front of the elite disciples wearing various casual practitioners' robes. 12 Numas, each with their own strength. You are all the elites carefully selected by the Linli building. It's inevitable to fight hard in the Xingxian mountain this time. Go all out. Ling Mo's words echoed in the room, powerful and resonant. Standing in the front, a young practitioner with a slightly dark complexion and a handsome face stuck out his chest and said loudly, "We will not let Lord Sin down. We will not let Lord Sin down. We will not let Lord Sin down." Everyone shouted in unison. Ling Mo nodded with relief. The elites he worked hard to cultivate finally had a day to use their martial arts. Lord Sin, I, Jiang Run, have doubts in my heart. I don't know whether I should ask. The young practitioner suddenly said in a neither humble or arrogant tone, the Tianjiao battle is a grand event in Qingshui's circle for 1,000 years. We must treat it with caution. But why don't you let Lord Fang Ciyuan, who is powerful and destroyed the bloody circle, take part in it? Instead, you let Lord Qingshui, who has just joined the force, go. How dare you? Ling Mo frowned. Jiang Run immediately took a step back, bowed with hands folded, and saluted, I'm presumptuous. I'm also worried about the Linli building. Lord Qingshui is really a good person. Since she joined the Linli building, she has solved a lot of small troubles for the disciples. We admire her. But she is gentle and kind. If she wants to fight with the practitioners of the holy sects, it's really inappropriate. Fang Yuan stopped drinking and witnessed this scene. A strange expression appeared in his eyes. Qingshui, gentle and kind. He admitted that Qingshui had some kindness in her heart, but gentle. How could he see it? Whether it was to destroy the bloody circle or to solve the ghosts in the Yangji desert, her means were not gentle at all. Ling Mo was even more speechless. The destruction of the bloody circle was only known by a few people, and he personally ordered the blockade. The Tianjiao list was of great importance. Naturally, the fewer people knew Qingshui's strength, the better. Unexpectedly, these 12 melons dared to rebel. How can you refute the decision of the high level? Ling Mo waved his sleeves, turned around, and said coldly, if the time is limited, you have already been punished in the crack of the yang pole. Jiang Run's neck shrank back when he heard the words crack in the yang pole, but his eyes were still filled with unwillingness. Fellow practitioner Sin, don't embarrass the young man. He is also for the Linli building. Su Li walked lightly and leisurely, followed by Su Buwang, who looked reluctant. When Jiang Run saw her, a trace of awkwardness flashed across his face. Everyone hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Lord Qingshui. Greetings, young master. Don't stand on ceremony. Seeing that Su Li was not angry, Jiang Run breathed a sigh of relief, but his disappointment deepened. Lord Qingshui's temper was really very soft. Su Li narrowed her eyes and glanced at the 12 young figures. Her lips moved slightly, and she transmitted the sound, they are all good seedlings. It's very dangerous for me to take them to Xingxian Mountain. Are you willing to do that? Ling Mo looked serious and replied, the rise of the Linli building must be paved with blood. It can't be avoided. But you have to do everything according to your ability. Come back alive. Where there is life, there is hope. Not to mention the kindness of destroying the blood circle, Qingshui was now the strongest person of the Linli building. He was a trump card, and they couldn't afford to lose him. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Su Li smiled slightly and walked to Fang Yuan. She picked up a cup of wine that had already been filled. She put it to her lips and sipped it. Then she said to Fang Yuan with a smile, I won't drink before I leave. I'll invite fellow practitioner Fang when I come back. Fang Yuan was stunned, and then the seriousness in his eyes faded away. He rarely said seriously, see you. Su Li's eyes flashed, and her cup gently touched the cup in Fang Yuan's hand. See you. See you. After a while, Ling Mo took Su Li and others to the underground of the headquarters of the Linli building. After walking to the end, a huge and complicated transmission matrix came into view. Su Li's eyes flashed, the ancient transmission matrix. Qingshui, you have good eyesight. Ling Mo nodded, the environment outside the Yinyang territory, whether it is the Yang Pole Desert or the Yin Pole Swamp, is too bad. Only with this transmission matrix can we transmit messages to the outside world. However, this transmission matrix consumes an astronomical number of celestial stones every time a practitioner is teleported. If it is not necessary, it will never be opened. While talking, Ling Imo had walked to the front of the transmission matrix and put the last celestial stone in the groove. With a roar, the entire transmission matrix suddenly lit up. Su Li looked indifferent and stepped into it without saying anything. Jiang Run swallowed his saliva and followed her. Like the other 11 people, he couldn't help looking forward to it. Qing Shui, the place after this transmission matrix is in a sect of the Sword Sect. There will be someone to contact you and arrange the next trip. Sect of the Sword Sect. Su Li nodded slightly. I see. Whoosh. The transmission matrix shone brightly and was finally fully opened. After the light dissipated, there was no one in the matrix. Under the dim spiritual stone lamp, half of Ling Mo's face was hidden in the darkness, looming. I hope you are not an enemy. Chapter 558. Jiuli Region, Wanjian Sect, the top secret place. When Tingshan stood quietly in front of the transmission matrix with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was carved with the traces of time. He looked more vicissitudes than before, but he was still tall and straight like a sharp sword, soaring into the sky. Behind him, there were 4 practitioners, 3 men and 1 woman. They were all young, and their cultivation was in the early stage of Yuanying realm. Master, what are we waiting for? Ying Chao, the only female practitioner among the young practitioners, asked in a low voice. She had never seen her master being so serious. Although the Wanjian sect was a small sect in the eyes of other sects, as direct disciples, they naturally knew some secrets of the Wanjian sect. For example, the head of the Wanjian sect. Their master's strength was much higher than that of the lords of those small sections. At least he was in Huashan realm. Another example was that the cultivation resources of their sect were much more than those of other small sects, so they didn't have to compete for those barren spiritual minds. However, in order to maintain the image of the sect, the master had to go out every time to put on a show, which was very hard. This time, the 4 of them actually found that there was a transmission matrix in their sect that only those big sects had. Although they didn't recognize that it was an ancient transmission matrix, they were surprised. Their sect was really full of secrets. Don't ask too much. The people coming are all your senior fellow apprentices and senior sisters. We belong to the same sect. Remember. When Tingshan told the 4 people, it seemed that he felt it was inappropriate, so he added, like you, they are all disciples trained by the Wanjian sect. They have lived in the Wanjian sect since childhood. Do you understand? I understand. The 4 people could be the direct disciples of Wen Tingshan, so they were naturally smart. Their eyes flashed, and they responded in unison. Buzz. Suddenly, the quiet transmission matrix made a buzzing sound, and the bright white light rose. Wen Tingshan's face slightly froze. Who would lead the team this time? They are coming. Ying Chao murmured, staring at the matrix with her bright and round eyes. Wow, the light faded, and there were 13 people in the matrix. So many people. The other 3 direct disciples of the Wanjian sect looked at each other and saw the surprise in their eyes. The number of disciples trained secretly was twice as much as that of direct disciples. It seems that our Wanjian pavilion is most likely a foreign sect of this force. I don't know how this force compares with the Jiguang sect. Cheng Xing, the chief pro-disciple of the Wanjian sect, thought so. The 13 people in the tactical matrix had already approached Wen Tingshan. Fellow Daoist, are you the one who has come to receive us? Su Li was not surprised to see Wen Tingshan's face. As early as when Ling Yamo said sword sect, she guessed that it was probably the Wanjian sect. The information given by Hua Yan briefly recorded this. The Wanjian sect was a small sect in Zhuli region. It was founded 1,000 years ago. Because its disciple married into Jiguang's sect, ordinary sects didn't dare to offend it. So, it had existed to this day. He even used the original name. What a big heart. While Su Li was thinking, Wen Tingshan frowned. The leader was a strange woman. He had never seen her before. Did something happen to Ling Yamo? Could this person be trusted? Lord Myriad Swords, so it's you. Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn, Jiang Run stood out from behind Su Li and saluted with his hands folded. He said calmly, I am Jiang Run. When Tingshan looked a little relaxed and said, it's you. How is your master recently? Master is doing well. Jiang Run nodded with a smile and continued, this is Lord Qingshui. She just joined us recently. The news in Jueqing and the outside world are not spread fast. Lord Myriad Swords, you probably haven't received the news yet. I see. The vigilance in Wen Tingshan's eyes faded a little. He saluted with his hands folded and said, my name is Wen Tingshan. I am the owner of the Wanjian sect. Su Li saluted and said in a gentle tone, I am Qingshui. I am new here. If I offend you, please forgive me, Head Wen. Wen Tingshan frowned slightly, but didn't show any other expression. He nodded and continued, I have already discussed with him about the Tianzhou battle. Fellow Daoist Qingshui, can you be the elder of the Wanjian sect for the time being? I understand. Head Wen can arrange it at will. That's good. Let's go out first. Time is tight. 2 hours later, the spiritual boat of Jiguang's sect will come here and take us there. Wen Tingshan simply said and turned to go out. There was a sense of resoluteness both inside and outside. Just at the moment when he turned around, Jiang Run's mind suddenly sounded a question. Jiang Run, let me ask you, who made the decision to lead Qingshui? Jiang Run subconsciously lowered his head and secretly transmitted the sound, it's the master. Su Li listened to the transmission of sound between the two without showing any trace. Wen Tingshan's soul realm was not as good as that of Tianhun. In addition, Jiang Run's cultivation was low. It was easy for her to eavesdrop on the transmission of sound between the two. However, she only listened for a moment and then withdrew her divine awareness. Wen Tingshan mostly asked about her origin, and Jiang Run couldn't answer. At most, he said something like, Lord Qingshui is not suitable, which was meaningless. It was really meaningless. Wen Tingshan thought as he walked. The Wanjian sect had been hiding in the dark. This time, they sent 17 people to the Tianzhou battle, which was extremely high profile. It was impossible to send more people, and there was no suitable candidate in the Wanjian sect. In this case, he could only believe in Ling Mo's choice. Fellow practitioner of the Wanjian sect. Suddenly, Su Li's voice sounded behind him. Wen Tingshan slowed down and immediately retreated to walk side by side with Su Li. He asked in a deep voice, Fellow practitioner Qingshui, what can I do for you? I don't deserve any advice. Su Li smiled, the Wanjian sect is not a big sect. It's not appropriate to send 17 people to the Tianzhou battle. Wen Tingshan stopped and looked at Su Li inexplicably. How could she know that this was the Wanjian sect? It was absurd enough for Ling Yamo to let this girl go to the Tianzhou battle. She even told him all the information of the outside world. Tell her. A newcomer who had just joined for a month. Fellow practitioner, don't think too much. Su Li chuckled and said in a free and easy tone, I think, it's better to send at least half of the people to join the team of Jiguang's sect. We can say that they are disciples secretly trained by Xianjingzhou, which is less likely to attract attention. Jiguang's sect, they even told you this. Wen Tingshan said slowly, and his right hand hidden in his sleeve quietly made a gesture. Do you mean fellow practitioner Sin? Su Li didn't seem to notice Wen Tingshan's movement. She shook her head and smiled. No, I just happened to come to Jiuli region before joining your noble house. It was very lively that Su joined Jiguang's sect. After I joined your noble house, I naturally thought of it. I see. The gesture in Wen Tingshan's sleeve dissipated, and he said expressionlessly, next time, please make it clear, so as not to cause unnecessary misunderstanding. Su Li narrowed her eyes and nodded gently. Wen Tingshan took a deep look at her and turned his head. Let's go. The spiritual boat of Jiguang's sect is waiting. Jiang Run saw that the two seemed to be at odds with each other. He felt ashamed and hurriedly transmitted the sound. Lord Wanjian, although I think it is not appropriate for Lady Qingshui to go to the Tianzhou battle, she is by no means an enemy. Lord Wanjian, please don't be prejudiced against Lady Qingshui because of my words. Boy, it's none of your business. Don't worry. Wen Tingshan comforted him casually. He still didn't let go of his suspicion. Only 1 month was too short. If Qingshui deliberately hid, what could others see? Although he didn't know why Ling Imo was so assured about this woman, he had to be responsible for the Linli building. After a while, they walked to the end of the stone path. Wen Tingshan waved his sleeves and swept out a blue light. Whoosh, the stone door slowly moved, and the beautiful green landscape came into view. On the huge platform not far from the stone door, a spiritual boat with a height of several meters was quietly parked. When the stone door was opened, several streams of light rushed out of the spiritual boat and fell in front of everyone. After the streams of light dissipated, an old man with a goatee and a fierce face, wearing a cloud-pattern robe of Jiguang's sect, showed up. Lord Wanjian, I am honored to meet you. When Wen Tingshan saw him, his face was slightly relaxed. He also held his fist and said, it turns out to be Elder Hua. Thank you. The old man with a goatee showed a smile, which affected the wrinkles on his face. His fierce face made his smile extremely ferocious. I have to do my last effort for the sect before my bones rust. Jiang Run and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. Compared to Lord Qingshui's gentle and beautiful appearance, wouldn't Elder Hua's face be enough to scare a lot of people? Elder Hua, you are too serious. When Tingshan smiled faintly and stepped aside, these are the 4 personal disciples of my Wanjian sect. This time, you will take them to Xingxian Mountain to see the world. As for this is Qingshui from the Holy Land. This time, he will lead 12 people to join Jiguang's sect. Elder Hua, please arrange a position for him. Wen Tingshan thought for a long time, and finally didn't add fuel to the fire, but told the truth. When the old man with a goatee heard it, he suddenly looked serious and solemnly held his fist and said, I am the 4th elder of Jiguang's sect, Hua Shichen. Lord Qingshui is very polite. Su Li nodded gently, and her gentle voice came out from under the veil. This time, please take care of me, Elder Hua. Of course, of course. Hua Shichen laughed and waved his hand. Let's go as soon as possible. If we are late, I am afraid that there will be no place to live in Xingxian Mountain. Okay. When Tingshan nodded and turned to Ying Qiao, and the other 3, you should listen to Elder Hua all the way. Don't make trouble for Jiguang's sect, understand? I know. The 4 people responded in unison, but Elder Hua felt strange when he heard it. Shouldn't they listen to Lord Qingshui? Let's go. Su Li suddenly said, and Hua Shichen immediately came to his senses. He quickly bent down and beckoned with his hand, saying, please come with me. As he said, Huashichin first turned into a flowing light and flew to the deck of the spiritual boat. Under his operation, a hole was opened in the protective cover outside the spiritual boat. Without hesitation, everyone immediately flew into it. When Ting Shan walked to the bottom of the spiritual boat and fixed his eyes on the people on the deck of the spiritual boat. Don't trust Qing Shui too much. If there is any abnormality, you can act according to the circumstances. When Huashichin, who was controlling the tactical matrix of the spiritual boat, heard this, his pupils suddenly shrank and his mind was shocked. He almost fell into the spiritual stone box. Even the Lord of the Holy Land couldn't be trusted. What was going on? If you want to talk about The Poisonous Wife with more like-minded people, please follow You Read Literature on WeChat. Talk about life and find bosom friends. Chapter 559. 34 Chinese Network, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Buzz, the tactical matrix of the spiritual boat shook slightly, and then it flew away like an arrow leaving the bow. When Ting Shan turned back to the sect with a cold face. If the Jiguang sect was really exposed, they needed to be prepared in advance. At this moment, Jiang Run and others were on the deck of the spiritual boat. They had never been out of Ju Town. It was the first time for them to take the spiritual boat, so they felt fresh. They stayed on the deck and looked at the scenery in the clouds outside, unwilling to leave for a long time. Su Li didn't stop them. She turned her head and asked, "Elder Hua, where do I live?" Huashichin was shocked, but he didn't show it on the surface. He said with a smile, "Lord Qingshui, please wait a moment. I will take you there." Su Li nodded slightly. A moment later, Huashichin stopped in front of an extremely remote room on the second floor of the spiritual boat. He said cheekily, "This is your residence. The spiritual boat is small, so this is the only place left. Please forgive me." Su Li glanced at Huashichin with a faint smile. The latter suddenly sweated on his forehead. When he was about to say something, Su Li nodded and said, "This is a good place. I like quiet. There is one more thing to remind Elder Hua. Don't call me Lord. This is not the Linli building." Huashichin suddenly felt the pressure and nodded repeatedly, "It's my negligence. I won't bother Elder Qingshui." Su Li said softly, "If there is nothing important, don't come to me. I am in the dark, and you are in the light. It is more convenient to do things. After all, I will also participate in the battle." After saying this, Su Li opened the door and walked in. Huashichin was stunned. With a bang, the door was closed. Huashichin woke up with a start and looked confused. Lord Qingshui was a senior of the Linli building. How could she participate in the Tianzhou battle? Then wouldn't her age be? He was getting more and more confused. Half a day later, everyone on the deck finally saw enough and returned to the room arranged on the first floor of the spiritual boat. Only Huashichin was left to guard the tactical matrix in front of the deck. Not long after, the door in the middle of the second floor of the spiritual boat opened. Xianan walked out, stretched himself, and jumped to Huashichin's side. Huashichin smiled bitterly, "Young lord, how many times have I said that jumping on the spiritual boat is forbidden? This is the rule of Jiguang sect." Xianan smiled, "There are only you and me here. Will Elder Hua complain to my father?" Huashichin's smile became even more bitter. "Of course not." "That's good." Xianan shook his head indifferently, "I heard that someone from the Holy Land came today. I just finished practicing and came out. Why didn't I see him?" Huashichin nodded. "They are indeed here. They are resting in their rooms." Hearing this, Xianan became energetic and asked expectantly, "Who is the leader? Is it the strongest of Sin?" After taking over part of the Jiguang sect, he accidentally broke into his father's adytum, and finally came into contact with the core secret of the Jiguang sect, Linli building. In these files, what he saw most was nothing more than the strong people of the Linli building who only had a name. Among them, Sin was the most common. After seeing what Sin had done, Xianan was already a fan of Sin. If it weren't for the high price of the teleportation matrix, he would have flown to Ju City to see his idol. Huashichan laughed in his heart and shook his head. Lord Sin needs to govern the Holy Land. How can he have time to come out? The leader of this trip is named Qingshui. She is a female practitioner. You may not have heard of her. Ah. How could it be? Xianan was immediately disappointed, and he didn't even want to visit her. Forget it. After the Tianzhou battle, the people of the Holy Land will inevitably open the teleportation matrix. I can go to the secluded place of the Wanjian sect. Huashichan just listened and didn't say a word, but he sighed with emotion in his heart. It was good to be young. Suli was in the room, but her divine awareness covered the whole boat. The scene of Xian appearing naturally fell into her eyes. Has this kid already come into contact with the Linli building? She frowned. It's too early. How dangerous it is to let him go to the Tianzhou battle. What does Xian Jingzhou think? After thinking for a moment, the fluctuation in her eyes faded, and she meditated again. There were still 2 days to go to the Xingxian mountain. The sun set and the moon rose, and the sky gradually darkened. Huashichan sat cross-legged on the deck and stared around without sleeping. The law of the jungle and the cultivation circle was the truth. As long as the strength was strong enough, there were no rules to speak of. So, naturally, many practitioners took the crooked path. On this day, he had scared off many evil practitioners who wanted to kill and seize treasures with the reputation of the Jiguang sect. However, in Jiang Run's view, the other party seemed to be more because he saw Elder Hua's face. He came to help several times because of the evil practitioners, but every time he saw the face outside the spirit boat, it was not half as ferocious as Elder Hua. Perhaps appearance was also an advantage. Jiang Run touched his face, and all kinds of strange thoughts flashed in his mind. Are you Jiang Run? Perhaps Huashichan was bored, so he asked in a low voice. Jiang Run nodded and said, I am Jiang Run. Why don't you go rest? It's very boring to guard an ugly and old man like me. Jiang Run smiled and said, this is the first time for me to carry out a task, so I have to be responsible and not let master down. Who is your master? Huashichan was a little curious. Jiang Run immediately straightened his back and said solemnly, my master is not anyone else, but Sin. Huashichan's eyes brightened slightly, and he said with relief, the Holy Land has a successor. Senior, you flatter me. I still need to learn more. Jiang Run said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Huashichan was about to continue speaking, but his expression suddenly changed. He pinched the incantation with both hands, and the entire spirit boat's protective shield instantly doubled. Boom! There was a loud noise in the night sky, and the spirit boat shook violently, making a sound of being overwhelmed. Even if Huashichan temporarily increased the defense, it still couldn't withstand the shock wave, and shattered into powder, turning into sparkles and falling down. What's going on? Enemy attack, get out! Everyone instantly woke up, rushed out of the room, and gathered in front of the spirit boat. Old Hua, what happened? Xianan walked to Huashichan's side, glanced at Jiang Run with extraordinary temperament, and asked with a frown. Young lord, it's not good. Huashichan gritted his teeth and stared at the dim clouds ahead, and his tone was indescribably dignified. Ha 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 ha. However, at this moment, a burst of wild laughter accompanied by dozens of figures appeared from the clouds. It wasn't destroyed by the spirit extermination cannon. This is a top-grade spirit boat. Boss, you really have sharp eyes. You've caught a big fat sheep at once. As they spoke, the figure approached. Huashichan and others finally saw the person who was dealing with them, and they were all shocked. Black clothes and black hat, with a bloodline on his forehead, this dress, it's the Dark Blood Bandits. Someone from the Jiguang sect exclaimed, with a trace of uncontrollable horror in his voice. Dark Blood Bandits. Jiang Run and others were at a loss. For the forces outside the Yinyang region, except for the holy sects, their experience was almost nothing. All blank. Sure enough. Huashichan sighed in a low voice. Their luck was really bad. In this case. His eyes were cold, and he seemed to have made up his mind. He quickly transmitted the sound, "Young Lord, Jiang Run, find a chance to escape with people." What? How do we know if we don't try? Jiang Run was shocked. Before he finished speaking, he heard the Dark Blood Bandits outside the spirit boat took out a pitch-black flute and said with a grim smile, "Kill them all. Leave no one alive." In an instant, dozens of black shadows rushed out like lightning and fought with many disciples on the deck. Seeing the black flute, Huashichan's face changed greatly. Oh no. It's the blood demon flute user. We must not let him play the demonic sound. He made a gesture with both hands, and the flying sword rushed out. But halfway, it was caught by a big hand and broken. What? Huashichan's pupils shrank suddenly, and he was shocked. Then he noticed the burly man standing on the edge of the spirit boat. He grinned and sneered, "Don't take out this kind of toy to make a fool of yourself." The physical practitioner could break his flying sword with one hand, at least in the middle stage of nature's test. The other person could play the blood demon flute, at least in the early stage of nature's test. The strength of the Dark Blood Bandits was so high that it made people desperate. Jiang Run glanced at the deck and didn't see Su Li's voice. His eyes slightly sank, and his figure disappeared into the nothingness. "Old Hua, don't panic." Xianan snorted coldly. Countless small golden swords appeared around him out of thin air on the sword rune on his neck. They connected into a golden line and shot through the burly man's chest in the blink of an eye. It was too fast for people to react. The burly man groaned and stepped back a few steps. He looked at the golden swords floating around Xianan with fear. The owner of this sword rune could hurt him, which meant that the cultivation of the owner was higher than him. He could only wait for the boss to take action. Puff! But at this moment, a clear sound of the blade piercing the flesh came into the ears of the burly man. The burly man suddenly turned back, only to see that Jiang Run had touched the back of the blood demon flute envoy. He pierced the latter's pubic region with a sword and sneered, "Want to play the demonic sound? Did you ask me?" Seeing this scene, Xianan was surprised and delighted. "Old Hua, who is he? He is so powerful." Old Hua was ashamed and gratified. The new generation excels the old. The disciple of Lord Sin is really extraordinary. I see. Xianan's eyes brightened slightly. He, who admired Ling Yamo very much, was not surprised. The blood demon flute envoy lowered his head and saw the blade in his pubic region dripping with blood. After a moment of silence, he suddenly laughed in a low voice. Jiang Run's face changed slightly. "What are you laughing at?" The blood demon flute envoy slowly raised his head, and the bloodline on his forehead suddenly burned. "I laugh at you. You don't know it until you die." Boom! The monstrous demonic energy broke out. Jiang Run bore the brunt of it, but he had no time to avoid it. He was hit directly. He looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then he flew straight back and smashed a large number of houses on the spirit boat. "Damn it! You actually let the boss use the blood curse." Do you really think I can't deal with you? The burly man was furious. His clothes burst apart, and his body size increased 3 times. He smashed the golden sword around him into pieces with one punch. Crack! A crack suddenly appeared in the sword rune. Xianan was frightened, but he did not retreat. His hands made the sword gesture at the fastest speed in his life. In an instant, hundreds of small golden swords attacked and temporarily entangled the burly man. Ha 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 ha. The feminine figure of the blood demon flute envoy walked out of the demonic energy. The blood line on his forehead had disappeared. He put the flute to his mouth, and his soft tone made everyone's hair stand on end. All of you, go to hell. Chapter 560. 34 Chinese Language Network, Wonderful Pop-Up Window Free Reading. In the ruins of the spirit boat, Jiang Run coughed up blood incessantly as he struggled to prop himself up. He looked at the battle on the deck, then at his companions who had come out with him. They were all in imminent danger. His heart sank, and his eyes were filled with unwillingness. How could they die here before they arrived at Xingxian Mountain? He carefully looked at all the people in the field again. After confirming that the figure was not there, he was suddenly stunned. Was Lady Qingshui from the Dark Blood Bandits? Otherwise, how could she not appear when the Dark Blood Bandits intercepted her? The more Jiang Run thought about it, the more he felt that it was the truth. He couldn't suppress his anger and growled, "Qingshui. Silly boy, what are you thinking about?" Suddenly, a familiar and gentle voice appeared in his ears. Su Li's figure gradually solidified. Jiang Run's angry face suddenly froze. Before he said anything, Su Li shook her head and sighed. Refining things is really troublesome. Such a big movement. Before he finished his words, Jiang Run saw the figure beside him suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of the messenger of the bloody flute in the blink of an eye. Who is it? The messenger of the bloody flute didn't even see the figure clearly. He felt numb on his scalp. When he was about to make a move, the bloody flute appeared in his opponent's hand. An evil practitioner. Su Li's fingertips touched the black flute and it was plated with a layer of silver light. She squinted her eyes and threw the flute. It suddenly turned into a silver light and pierced the heart of the burly man at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. Blood spilled in the void. The burly man covered his chest and looked back to see a woman beside his leader. He was frightened. He had used his unique skill. How could his defense be broken? How dare you destroy my flute? You're courting death. The messenger of the bloody flute shouted ferociously. His 5 fingers turned into claws and the demonic energy surged. He grabbed Su Li's face. I'll use your head to refine my flute. Su Li tilted her head slightly and dodged his attack. Her slender and white palm directly grasped his hand and exerted force. A series of cracking sounds sounded and the palm of the messenger of the bloody flute was crushed into pieces. Someone like you dares to covet my life. Su Li ridiculed him with a smile. The messenger of the bloody flute was terrified and screamed incredulously, how is it possible? You are not afraid of the demonic energy. Puff! A head flew high into the air, and blood spurted out for several zhang. Su Li stretched out her hand and grasped in the air. The head and body of the blood flute envoy suddenly burst into blood mist. A transparent figure with a frightened face floated out of it, but he failed to escape. Hong Baizhu seized the opportunity to take him into Zhang cave. Boss! The burly man was shocked and angry, but he did not lose his reason. He immediately ordered, retreat. Everyone retreat. Scatter and run. He fiercely stamped his feet and instantly rushed out several hundred feet away. Suli flashed back to the front of the spiritual boat. Seeing the scattered Shuin bandits, she curled her lips and said, "How dare you run away in front of me?" As she thought of this, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she glanced at it lightly. Instantly, pang! 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 Dozens of blood flowers bloomed in the air at the same time. All the fleeing cultivators of the dark blood bandits exploded into a mist of blood before they could even scream. After finishing this step, Suli withdrew her hand and said indifferently to the people standing on the spiritual boat, "Elder Hua, you can repair the spiritual boat first. I will be back soon." As she said, her figure disappeared like a ghost again. On the other side, the burly man covered his chest and did not dare to relax. He used all his strength to escape desperately. In just a few blinks of an eye, he had escaped hundreds of miles away. "Since you are here, why leave?" Suddenly, a soul-stirring voice sounded behind him. The burly man instantly had goosebumps. He turned back and put his hands in front of his chest. The golden light of body refining shone brightly. In the next moment, 2 arms were cut off by the sharp sword light. They were thrown high and sprinkled in the air with blood. "Your little body refinement cultivation isn't worth mentioning in my eyes." Suli tilted her head and smiled, as if she was talking about something unrelated to life and death. "There are few practitioners of body refining in Qingshui's circle. It is rare to see one. How about I send you to hell with real body refining?" "No!" The burly man screamed in horror and wanted to escape. Suli punched out and instantly annihilated the man along with the surrounding void. Only the cracked black flute was left floating in the air. It didn't break. Suli was slightly surprised. She waved her hand and the flute fell by itself. It was cold and light to the touch. It weighed about 50 kilograms. Suli couldn't see anything special about it. She put it away and looked at the broken spiritual boat in the distance. Her smile suddenly disappeared. "Black Lotus, I trusted you too much. I asked you to keep an eye on the outside when I refined the external incarnation. Why didn't you tell me when the dark blood bandits attacked?" The black ring appeared between her fingers. Black Lotus showed up reluctantly. He shrank his neck and didn't dare to look at Suli. Could he say that he didn't like Jiang Run and wanted to teach him a lesson? After all, Jiang Run was almost killed. If he said it directly, Suli might use the divine thunder to wake him up. Suli snorted coldly, "Tell me the origin of the dark blood bandits, and I won't hold you accountable for your negligence." Black Lotus didn't dare to hesitate and immediately said honestly, "The dark blood bandits. I have never heard of them. Maybe they are an evil force that has risen in the past 10,000 years. I have some memory of the method of blood burning they used just now. It's a method of evil practitioners called Blood God One-Line Sky. Many evil practitioners sects in ancient times could use it. Among them, the Shueishan sect used it the earliest and best. There was a great emperor in the sect. I don't know his specific name, but he should not be a powerful figure." "You don't even remember the name of the great emperor?" Suli raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "No wonder you don't care about me, who is just a character in Junior Emperor." Black Lotus was in a cold sweat and said with an embarrassed smile, "Master, I dare not. There were at least thousands of great emperors in ancient times. Only the strong ones could be immortalized. The others couldn't stand the erosion of time and are now reduced to dust. Who can remember them except their descendants?" Speaking of this, Black Lotus paused and said sadly, "Whether they are in Junior Emperor or Great Emperor, they are still mortal and will grow old and die. The real strong ones, such as the woman you saw in Chuangxing Path, are extraordinary and immortal-like figures. They will not die for tens of thousands of years, and even live as long as heaven and earth. Su Li narrowed her eyes. Have you seen them? Of course. Black Lotus nodded proudly, his eyes filled with reminiscence as he lamented, the era of the myriad spirit calendar was the time when cultivation was at its peak. There were many immortals out there, and even more who lived in seclusion. But later, those immortals all disappeared. Why? Su Li still wanted to continue to ask, but Black Lotus pointed to the spiritual boat at this time and said with a hollow smile, "Look, the spiritual boat has been repaired. Let's go back quickly." Su Li took a deep look at Black Lotus and stroked the Black Lotus ring with her fingers. "One day, you will be willing to say it." After that, she waved her sleeves and floated back. Black Lotus shrank back into the ring space and patted his head madly. Then he couldn't help but slap himself. He raised his head and let out a long sigh. When could he change the habit of disaster comes from the mouth? Su Li's figure floated to the bow of the spiritual boat, and the people waiting on the deck immediately stood up and surrounded her. Lord Qingshui. Jiang Run dragged his seriously injured body and walked over. His pale face showed shame. He bowed his head and said, Silly boy, you are also thinking for the sect. I have never blamed you. This time, I was negligent and almost caused a disaster." Su Li shook her head and said. After passing through a green spiritual light, Jiang Run suddenly felt a warm current flowing through his meridians and his injury was almost healed in the blink of an eye. "Brother Jiang Run, are you okay?" Ying Chao was so shocked that her mouth opened slightly. She looked back at Su Li with admiration in her eyes, and her little stars almost overflowed. Not only did she kill decisively, but she also mastered excellent medical skills. There was such a perfect female senior in the world. She was even better than her master. Lord Qingshui would be Ying Chao's idol from now on. Jiang Run moved his right hand away from his aching chest and couldn't hide the joy on his face. He quickly knelt down and saluted, "Thank you for healing me, Lord Qingshui. It's okay. Go back and have a good rest." Su Li said and turned her eyes to the others, "And you, all of you are more or less injured. Go back and heal your injuries quickly. You must return to your peak state before the Tianjiao contest. As for the rest..." Su Li's eyes swept over everyone and her red lips opened slightly. "It's okay with me." As soon as she said that, all the young practitioners present were suddenly warmed up and responded in unison, "Yes, Elder Qingshui." Hua Shichen was very fast. The spirit boat's cabin had already been repaired, and everyone returned to their rooms one after another. Jiang Run was the last to leave. He turned his head back to look at the calm black phantom on the deck, and he suddenly understood something that his master had once said. There is always such a person who will make you want to listen to her orders. It is not only because of her strength, but also because of her personality. In the blink of an eye, only Hua Shichen was left on the deck with a distressed expression. No, there was one more. Su Li raised her lips and chuckled, "My good brother, do you still want to hide and not come out?" Hua Shichen was confused. "Brother, was she calling me an old man?" Before he could ask in doubt, a figure rushed down from the second floor. The surprise and doubt in his eyes disappeared, and he said with surprise and excitement, "Sister. It's really you. This. Young lord." Hua Shichen's eyes widened. The young lord actually knew Lady Qingshui and called her brother and sister. "I guarantee it's real." Su Li gently tidied up Xian'an's messy hair, but there was a hint of blame in her tone. "How can your father be willing to let you take risks? And you even joined the Linli building. I must find him later to settle accounts." No. Xian'an suddenly shivered and said embarrassedly, "I accidentally turned over the confidential file. This time, I also sneaked out. I don't believe that the lord of a sect with eyes all over the Jiuli region doesn't know that you sneaked out. Su Li snorted coldly and turned to glance at Huashichan. You are also responsible for this matter. Yes, Huashichan nodded and suddenly fell silent. He was forced to hide his whereabouts by the young lord. How could he be scolded by the lord of the Holy Land? Thinking of this, Huashichan suddenly felt extremely wronged. Chapter 561. 34 Chinese Net, in 1 second wonderful pop-up window free reading. Huashichan pouted his mouth like an oil bottle. Coupled with his ferocious and horrible face, it was so incongruous that Xianan was speechless. Even Su Li's eyes twitched when she saw it. She said, "Forget it. It's not convenient to investigate it now. When will the spiritual boat restart?" Huashichan didn't dare to be angry. He quickly calmed down and said with embarrassment, "Lord, the driving core of the spiritual boat is not damaged, but the matrix of Hunyuan Zhou's shield set on the spiritual boat is as high as the 9th grade. If there is no high-grade matrix to protect it, the wind pressure at high speed will destroy the spiritual boat in an instant. But if the speed is low, we can't get to the Xingxian mountain in time. What should we do? I don't know the matrix of Hunyuan Zhou's shield." Su Li's words made Huashichan's old face suddenly gloomy, and the unrealistic hope in his heart was also broken. Lord Qingshui's figure was full of youthfulness. His cultivation was so high that he must be a top figure among the talents. He focused on cultivation, so how could he be distracted by the tactical matrix? However, I can give it a try. As soon as the words came out, Huashichan was stunned. "Lord, you..." Before he could ask, Su Li threw out a ownerless flying sword with a light cyan halo. "Your flying sword was destroyed, and you were hurt. Go back to the room first and come back in 2 hours." Huashichan subconsciously took over the flying sword. When he came to his senses, he was shocked and stuttered, This is a precious weapon. Oh my God." Xianan was not surprised. His sister could even give him the extremely valuable poisonous power insect, so she was naturally rich. He immediately smiled and patted Huashichan's shoulder. "Thank me quickly. You didn't lose this time, did you?" Yes. Huashichan woke up and quickly cupped his hands and bowed deeply. "Thank you for your gift, Lord Qingshui. It doesn't matter." Su Li waved her hand casually, and her eyes fell on Xianan. The latter immediately scratched his head and said, "I'm going back to practice." "Sister, you are busy." He naturally knew that his sister not only had unfathomable strength, but also had many secrets. She was definitely a big shot. Since his sister didn't want others to know some things, he certainly had to be a good example. This subordinate will take his leave. Huashichan retreated happily, and Su Li was left alone on the bow. Su Li walked to the wooden disc that controlled the tactical matrix and sat down cross-legged. Her palm swept over the first tactical matrix, and the black light rune flashed away. Huashichan is right. The core is intact. All we need to do is add a defensive array rune. As Su Li thought, her fingertips brushed over the scorched second disc. A layer of sawdust was immediately shaved off the surface, revealing the original snow-white wood color. Su Li was surprised. It is a 1,000-year-old spiritual wood, which can support the tactical matrix of the 11th grade. Unfortunately, the surface of the spiritual wood is too small. Well, that's it. Thinking of this, Su Li picked up the spiritual pen for repairing matrix, and deductions appeared in her eyes. In an instant, runes appeared on the spiritual plate, and some fell down like black snowflakes. 4 hours later, Huashichan came back sweating profusely with the flying sword that was initially refined. Lord Qingshui said 4 hours, and he couldn't be late. But when he came to the bow of the spiritual boat, Su Li was nowhere to be found. "Hey, Lord Qingshui." Hua Shichen patted his head. He wanted to change the best room on the spiritual boat for Lord Qingshui, but he didn't see him. He muttered and walked to the spiritual plate. He inadvertently glanced at the brand new black rune on the spiritual plate on the right, and he was instantly stunned. A new tactical matrix pattern. He hurriedly sat down to check. Although he couldn't tell what kind of tactical matrix was on the spiritual plate, the new tactical matrix pattern was integrated and far more complex than before. It was not drawn blindly. Lord Qingshui is proficient in tactical matrix. Above the 9th grade, isn't it? Hua Shichen's eyes widened. The more he thought about it, the more shocked he was. But his hands didn't stop, and he continued to fill the core of the tactical matrix with spiritual stones. 5 minutes later, boom! The spiritual boat soared into the sky, and the transparent light shield instantly lit up. The reaction speed is 3 seconds faster than before, and Hua Shichen swallowed and controlled the spiritual boat to speed up. The light shield was motionless, and it was much more stable than the previous 9th grade tactical matrix. It is really a 10th grade tactical matrix. Hua Shichen confirmed his thoughts, and he was even more shocked. He looked back at the secluded closed door on the 2nd floor. He had never heard of such a powerful female practitioner, let alone seen one. Those talents in holy sex were no better than her, right? Could it be that the Holy Land was comparable to holy sex? Then this Tianjiao battle, Hua Shichen was shocked, and suddenly a thought that he didn't dare to think about before arose in his mind. In the following time, the spiritual boat encountered several waves of bandits, but they were not troublesome, and Hua Shichen sent them away. After just one day, everyone finally entered the Ascending Immortal Domain. The Ascending Immortal Domain was extremely small, with a radius of only 100,000 miles. Compared with other domains that easily covered millions of miles, it was extremely pocket-sized. There were no sects in the Ascending Immortal Domain. Except for the wilderness, there was a high mountain in the center that went straight into the clouds, and the top couldn't be seen. It was the famous Ascending Immortals Mountain. In the ancient stone quarry halfway up the Ascending Immortals Mountain, there was a mottled stone wall. From a distance, it looked like a rag hanging on the mountainside. If no one introduced it, no practitioner who came here for the first time would know that the famous Tianjiao list in Qingshui's circle was that rag. "Milord, we have arrived at the Ascending Immortals Mountain." The sound came faintly from outside the door. Su Li slowly opened her eyes, and the jade light flashed away. Feeling the vigorous and surging power in her body, she murmured in a low voice. "The peak of Yuanying Realm." After breaking through the Chuangxing path in Zhezhou region, Su Li's cultivation went straight from the early stage of Yuanying Realm to the peak of Yuanying Realm within a month, without any hindrance. Su Li was not surprised about this. The realm of her soul and strength exceeded her cultivation too much. For her, the Yuanying realm could only be regarded as a quantitative accumulation, which was not difficult. The Chuangxing path has now become an obstacle to my cultivation. Su Li frowned. Indeed, every time she went to the Chuangxing path, it took her too much energy, and she was in danger every time. However, she did not regret it. Wasn't the strength and foundation that far exceeded her cultivation realm exchanged for the Chuangxing path? However, I have to speed up. Otherwise, if my strength reaches the realm of the Great Emperor, I have to break through my cultivation realm, be reborn, and become an immortal. But my biggest problem now is not the Chuangxing path, but... Su Li spread out her palm, and a wisp of green flowed through her palm. Suiyu tactics. This mental method could indeed be called the ancient treasure. Just practicing to the second level could help her avoid the harm of the natural law. But, It was too time-consuming to explore it without knowing the secret. And what she lacked most was time. It is said that the ascending Immortals Mountain is also left in the ancient times. I don't know if I can gain anything. Su Li withdrew her palm and heard the call outside. She changed into the disciple uniform of Jiguang's sect, covered her face with a veil, and got up to open the door. Lord Qingshui. Lord Qingshui. When everyone saw Su Li, they all showed awe and saluted. Especially Huishichen, his attitude was even more respectful. Don't stand on ceremony. Su Li's sleeves fluttered in the wind, and a virtual force suddenly passed through them and lifted them up. Don't be so polite. This trip is led by Elder Hua. Don't expose yourself. Su Li walked to Xianan and glanced at everyone in the field. Her voice was gentle. If someone deliberately leaks the secret, you know the punishment better than me. As soon as these words came out, Jiang Run and others' pupils shrank, and they all agreed. The disciples of Jiguang's sect and Wanjian's sect also nodded. Seeing Su Li's dress, Elder Hua understood the reason. He was shocked that Su Li really wanted to participate in the Tianjiao battle in person, but he also said with a smile, Lord Qingshui saved our lives in the battle of the Shuyin bandits. How can we not follow what you said? That's good. Su Li's tone contained a smile, but the obscurity in her eyes was cold. It was time for holy sects to pay back their debts. After a while, the spiritual boat stopped at the foot of Immortals Mountain. Huishichen walked out with everyone. Looking up, they saw an endless stream of spiritual boats in the sky, like a meteor shower, landing everywhere in the wilderness. It's less than 10 days before the Tianjiao battle begins. The Immortals city must be full. Obviously, it was not the first time for Huishichen to come here. He took people to a huge and towering ancient city at the foot of the mountain with ease. Is there a city in the Immortals region? Xianan looked up at the city gate tower that was hundreds of meters high and exclaimed, what a high city, much higher than the mountain gate of my Jiguang sect. The rest of the people also revealed looks of admiration. Not to mention the immortal Ascension Mountain that pierced the clouds, just the height of the city was enough to make one admire it. Hee hee. Huishichen said with a smile, this city is more than 5,000 meters high, and it is a relic of the ancient times. In Qingshui's circle, I am afraid that only the ancient everlasting city of Tianhe sect can be compared with it. All newcomers are shocked. As Huishichen said, he saw more and more practitioners gathered in front of the city gate. He immediately waved his hand, let's talk about this after we enter the city. Go and line up first. Su Li followed the crowd and looked up at the obviously brand new city gate plaque. Her eyes were deep, and Black Lotus's endless shocked words came into her ears. What immortal city? This is clearly the enchanting ghost city of our ghost clan. Who named the Immortals Mountain? That is the mountain of the Lotus Immortal cult. Tianjiao list. Isn't that the Wangtian tablet of the primary Buddha ancient temple? The things of human, ghost and Buddhist sects come together and actually coexist peacefully. What a mess. Black Lotus was completely confused, and Su Li could understand most of it. Things of the ancient sects. Maybe there will be news of Suyu tactics, and this ghost city. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she withdrew her gaze. She did feel an extremely weak calling force, but with the weirdness of the ghost clan, it was still debatable whether it was a blessing or a curse. The guards of the city gate were all maintained by the disciples sent by the Four Peaks. The sects of Qingshui's circle naturally did not dare to act rashly. The whole team advanced in an orderly manner, and the speed was not slow. About an hour later, the people of Jiguang's sect approached the city gate. Huishichen was about to hand in the document of Jiguang's sect, but at this time. Chapter 562. A roar came from the far end of the sky, as if the thunder from the ninth heaven had struck everyone's heart. Those with weaker cultivation in the field immediately bled from their mouths and noses. Even Jiang Run and others felt that their internal breath was unstable and their blood was shaking. In just a few seconds, four magnificent palaces with different numas appeared above everyone's head. All the practitioners were suddenly shocked and made way for a large open space. Su Li retreated with others and watched the four palaces fall calmly. It's the peak holy sects. Hua Shichen's pupils shrank suddenly and he exclaimed in a low voice. Are these the four peak holy sects? The disciples of Jiguang's sect muttered to themselves. It was the first time for them to see the peak holy sects, so they inevitably lost their composure. The four people of Wanjin's sect were not much better. However, Jiang Run and other 12 people had seen the bloody circle. Although they were amazed by the power of the peak holy sects, they didn't show it on the surface. Hua Shichen saw it and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. They really deserved to be from the Holy Land. Even the inherited disciples in the sect couldn't compare with Lord Qingshui. Squeak! At this time, the green door to the leftmost palace suddenly opened, and a cold-faced young man with an evil aura slowly stepped out. His eyes swept over the many cultivators, and a chilling evil aura spread out, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Behind him, many elders in green robes followed respectfully. The first holy son of Ankue Valley, Chu Qingning. He is the holy son of Ankue Valley. It is said that he is more than 1,900 years old. His poison skills are superior to his peers. After returning to the sect from the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, he has been silent for 1,000 years. His cultivation is unfathomable. Hua Shichen secretly transmitted the sound to Su Li and other people from Jueqing. After all, in his understanding, people in Jueqing were too uninformed. It was always good to talk about the common sense of Qingshui Circle. Jiang Run and others didn't get to know the core of the Linli building, which was really an eye-opener. They couldn't help but nod secretly. Su Li remained calm and raised her eyebrows slightly. Is this the second test of Qiyu evil skill? In the reincarnation mirror, she once pretended to be Mr. Li and asked Ling Qinglan for the mental method of Qiyu evil skill. So, she naturally knew the bottleneck. If she wanted to practice this method, she had to get rid of 7 disasters first. The first one was desire. When she saw Chu Qingning in the ancestral land of the Ghost Clan, she noticed that he was no longer a virgin. But there was only a breath of a woman around him, and he controlled it quite well. It should be noted that Qiyu Xiangong was cultivated in the reincarnation mirror, which was of the upper grade of the mysterious rank, and it was much easier. The reincarnation mirror played a big part in the success of his eldest brother. Now this method appeared in Qingshui Circle. Qiyu Xiangong was a top mental method of holy grade. After a few years, Chu Qingning had crossed the first test and reached the second test, evil thoughts. The so-called evil thoughts were thinking about doing evil all the time. No one knew how Ankue Valley suppressed it. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly. The holy sect was really not simple. But at this time, a white-haired old man in the Taoist robe of Ankue Valley hurried to Chu Qingning in the immortal Ascension City. He saluted and said with a smile, "Your Highness, I have been waiting for you for a long time." Chu Qingning snorted coldly, "10th Elder, I have stopped here for 3 seconds. You are late. How dare you stand to see me?" The white-haired old man's face changed slightly. He had long heard that the first holy son had made rapid progress in his holy martial arts and had entered the second stage. He was very grumpy, but he didn't expect that he was so bad. Before 10th Elder could think of a way to deal with it, the most luxurious and magnificent palace in the 4 major palaces slowly opened. 2 rows of beautiful and dignified maids walked out of it. They bowed their heads and stood silently on both sides. An exquisite woman with snow-white skin walked out slowly. Her golden skirt was dotted with starlight, flashing with unknown power. Behind her, a group of old women followed her. All of them had obscure breaths and were extremely horrible. Such a proud woman stunned the audience as soon as she appeared. But the coldness and indifference in her eyes made many practitioners not dare to look at her directly. They all looked away. This woman was Yin Xuedong, the holy girl of Huangxinghou. The holy sun of Ankue Valley is still so unbearable. As soon as Yin Xuedong appeared, she did not forget to ridicule Chu Qingning. Her words were not polite. Chu Qingning didn't get angry when he heard the words. He turned his head and grinned. Yin Xuedong, I know what kind of person you are. The pot calling the kettle black. How dare you say that to me? Yin Xuedong looked calm, and her reaction was mediocre. It seemed that she had long been accustomed to Chu Qingning's way of fighting back. Haven't you quarreled enough after 1,000 years? In the third plane in ancient palace, Fang Mu helplessly led a group of superiors of the Tianhe sect to descend. He was still a young man with red lips and white teeth. He looked calm and sharp. In the years after his eldest brother Fang Yuan left, he finally became a man who had completely sharpened himself. Fang Mu, don't be a peacemaker. Chu Qingning frowned. It has been 1,000 years. Are you still immersed in that dream and haven't woken up? Silly boy, you are as silly as your eldest brother, and your Tianhe sect. First holy son, be careful with your words. Before Chu Qingning finished his words, the first elder, who had the highest status behind him, immediately came out to stop him. The Tianzhou battle was imminent, and they couldn't have any disputes now. Any grievances could be left to the Tianzhou battle. I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to remind me. Chu Qingning's face became gloomy. He waved his sleeves and swaggered into the immortal Ascension City alone without waiting for people of Xingtian Shrine to come out. The first elder sighed secretly, but he didn't change his expression. He directly put away the palace and followed up with the crowd. Ankue Valley is also a holy sect. How can there be such a foppish and rude holy son? It is said that his temperament changed greatly after that incident. I see. Some people in the crowd secretly transmitted the sound, but as the last black palace opened, there was a dead silence in the field. Tap, 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 the sound of footsteps approached, and then a tall and cold young man in a dark robe walked out from the darkness. Every single step he took seemed to have been measured, and it was extremely precise. A shapeless imposing aura instantly spread out to the surroundings. The elders and disciples of Xingtian Shrine who followed behind him looked awestruck and followed the crowd. Here he comes. This is the first talent of Qingshui's circle, the first holy son of Xingtian Shrine. Although there was no battle in the immortal Ascension Mountain in the last Tianzhou list, he undoubtedly ranked first on the Tianzhou list because of his horrible achievements. He is called Lingli, the Emperor of Evil. Hua Shichen transmitted the sound in horror, which shocked everyone. His deeds can't be finished even if we talk about them for 3 days and 3 nights. Without his appearance, Xingtian Shrine would never be able to sit firmly on the throne of the first holy sect. Countless talents died in his hands, and even the talents of the holy sects were no exception. It is also rumored that he is indifferent and ruthless. Although there are 3,000 beauties in the imperial palace, he doesn't like children. Any child conceived by a woman will be executed immediately. Back then, during the bloody calamity of the divine spirit, he was even killed by him with his own hands. The title of demonic emperor is truly terrifying. Jiang Run's brows furrowed as he listened. He couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence. How can such an inhuman evil practitioner be allowed to reach the top? Doesn't the holy sects care about it? Hua Shichen shook his head and laughed. Boy, you are still too naive. Xingtian Shrine is an evil sect. There is no distinction between good and evil in the world. Jiang Run was speechless for a while. These discussions would not be passed to Ling Li's ears. He glanced indifferently at Yin Xuedong, who was expressionless, and Fang Mu, who had a complicated expression. Then he withdrew his gaze, put the temporary palace into his sleeve, and went into the city. What a boring person. Yin Xuedong muttered. She waved her hand and led people into the city one after another. Fang Mu, who fell lashed, was full of sadness in his eyes, but he soon cheered up and ignited the fire of fighting. He thought in his heart, Ling Li. In the Tianjiao battle, I will let you know that being heartless is not the right way. Su Li squinted her eyes and said nothing. What difficulties do you have? You would rather let Buang suffer outside than keep him by your side. You even painstakingly set up a trap and spread so many false words. While thinking, Hua Shichen had already handed over the official document and called everyone to enter the city. Seeing this, Su Li stopped thinking and stepped up to follow him. After entering the city, Hua Shichen took everyone to the largest inn in Immortal Ascension City, Tainyak Inn. Most of the holy sects were stationed in Immortal Ascension City. Except for the most mysterious intelligence force in Qingshui Circle, there was no one else who could open a chain of inns in the city. Shopkeeper, we've booked a courtyard. Hua Shichen came to the counter of the inn and handed in the token. The cultivation of the shopkeeper of Tainyak Inn here was not much worse than his. The strength of Tainyak Inn could be seen. It turns out to be the elder of Jiguang's sect. The shopkeeper took the token and immediately showed a kind smile. He glanced at the many young disciples behind him, and there was no lack of surprise in his eyes. He couldn't help but salute. It seems that Jiguang's sect is expected to go further this year. I congratulate you in advance. It's hard to say. Hua Shichen couldn't help laughing. He knew that with Lord Qingshui, the position of holy sect was in the bag, but it was not good to show it at this moment. However, after these humble words were uttered, there were actually people who responded to him. It's really hard to say. How dare the little good-for-nothings of your Jiguang sect try to get the position of holy sect? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone in Jiguang's sect immediately turned cold, and they all looked back. Even the smile of the shopkeeper of Tainyak Inn faded a little. Su Li looked back and saw a group of practitioners in black and gray uniform Taoist robes step into the inn together. The number of young disciples was no less than 100, far more than the Lin Li side. When Hua Shichen saw the leading elder with golden eyebrows, his ferocious face suddenly became more terrifying. He said in a cold voice, "Traitor! How dare you appear in front of me?" Seeing this, the elder with golden eyebrows laughed. "Ugly Hua, you are still as superficial as before." "No matter how superficial I am much better than you, a traitor who betrays the sect for glory." Hua Shichen looked cold, and his eyes were full of killing intent. If this place is not Xingxian Mountain. After the Tianjiao battle, you can't leave alive. I should say this to you, shouldn't I? The elder with golden eyebrows came to the counter with many disciples and took out a purple token from his hand. He glanced at the dim ordinary token in Hua Shichen's hand and sneered, "You probably don't know that your Jiguang sect is coming to an end, right?" When Hua Shichen saw the purple token, his face suddenly changed. Chapter 563. Holy Sect's Token. You. Hua Shichen's eyes widened. The golden-eyebrowed elder withdrew his hand and said contemptuously, "Cherish the last time. After the Tianjiao battle, our Splendor Hall will ascend to the position of a holy sect, and your Jiguang sect will be destroyed." Hua Shichen's face was extremely gloomy, and fear flashed in his eyes. The Splendor Hall and the Jiguang sect were both high-grade sects, and they were mortal enemies. There had been friction for thousands of years, and many geniuses had died in each other's hands. Now, the Jiguang sect suddenly had the holy sex token. It must be supported by a holy sect. Although their Jiguang sect had a holy land, its grade was not obvious. In his opinion, the grade of the holy land was at most the peak of high grade, and it was still far away from the holy sect. Oh, I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be Meng Bian, the old dog Meng, who I caught embezzling money and fled for fear of punishment. But at this moment, Xianan appeared behind Hua Shichen and smiled sarcastically. Why? You flatter a new backer, and your dog tail is high again. The golden-eyebrowed elder was poked in his sore spot, and his face instantly became extremely ugly. Resentful words were squeezed out from his teeth. Xianan, you little bastard. How dare you come here? Xianan laughed and ridiculed. Even you dare to come here, old dog Mang. Why don't I dare? The trash that our Jiguang sect doesn't want actually became an elder in the Splendor Hall. It's really a veritable garbage dump. It's the most suitable place for you to go there. In the end, Xianan deliberately showed a look of amazement. All the disciples of the Splendor Hall were shocked and angry when they heard the words, and glared at him. Little bastard. You are courting death. The blue veins on Meng Bian's forehead were exposed, and his eyes were red. He punched Xianan's cheek without saying a word. But before he punched halfway, he was blocked by a palm and couldn't move forward at all. In the Tainik attic, no force is allowed. The shopkeeper slowly reached out and pressed Meng Bian's fist back. Does the Splendor Hall want to break the eternal rules of our sect? Meng Bian suddenly came to his sense, and suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly held his hands and said, I dare not. Shopkeeper, please arrange a residence for me. The shopkeeper nodded and retracted his hand. If not for the holy sect's keepsake, you would have been chased out long ago. For the sake of my Tainik addict's reputation, I can't completely pardon you. The garden you booked is gone. Would you like to stay in a normal guest room? Meng Bian's expression changed. Shopkeeper, if you still want to talk about it, you can go sleep on the streets. The shopkeeper interrupted. Meng Bian's words stopped abruptly. His face turned green, but he did not dare to say another word. After going through the check-in process in a hurry, Meng Bian got the room plate. Seeing the people of Jiguang's sect who were still watching the joke, he smiled coldly and said in a very gloomy voice, Little bastard, no one will protect you in the talents battle. You will definitely die. Behind him, many disciples of the Splendor Hall looked at Xianan coldly, as if they were looking at a dead person. Xianan rolled his eyes. Meng Bian was afraid that he would get angry again, so he snorted and went upstairs directly. When they all disappeared into the staircase, the atmosphere in front of the counter immediately eased up. Shopkeeper, thank you for helping me out. Hua Shichen hurriedly cupped his hands and said. The shopkeeper shook his head with a smile, I just protect the face of Tainik attic. You don't need to thank me. It's an honor that Elder Hua doesn't blame us for not treating our guests well. What are you talking about, shopkeeper? Hua Shichen was immediately flattered, but he was surprised. Did the shopkeeper see that Lord Qingshui was extraordinary? Well, I am quite free now. I will take you to the Spring Court Garden in person. The shopkeeper smiled. Elder Hua, don't call me shopkeeper. My surname is Xia, and my first name is Wei. It turns out to be fellow practitioner Xia Wei. I am Hua Shichen. After they exchanged names, Xia Wei led everyone through the lobby on the first floor and walked to the depths along the clean and tidy stone-faced path. Su Li walked in the crowd, and a light flashed in her eyes. From beginning to end, she didn't show anything extraordinary, and she also noticed that the shopkeeper's eyes inadvertently fell on Jiang Run from time to time. Indeed, Jiang Run could become Ling Mo's personal disciple, so how could he be mediocre? His strength was so strong that he could rank in the upper middle of the Tianjiao list. Besides, he was very young and had infinite potential. In fact, Xia Wei did think so. Although the disciples of Jiguang's sect were a little few, their quality was excellent, especially the young man in black, whose breath faintly reached the Tianjiao of the upper grade, which was rare in the upper grade sections. If there is no accident, Jiguang's sect is really likely to win. On the contrary, although the Splendor Hall clings to the holy sects, the quality of its disciples, thinking so, Xia Wei stopped in front of a spacious courtyard. Although the Spring Court Garden is not the best garden, it also has all kinds of fine products. You must be very tired after coming from afar. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye. Hu Shichen hurriedly cupped his hands and watched Xia Wei leave. Wow! What a big and beautiful courtyard. It is more exquisite than the Zong Pavilion of our Jiguang sect. The disciples of Jiguang's sect opened the door and looked at the scenery inside the door. They couldn't help but marvel. Ying Qiao and others from the Wangjian sect were even more excited. They quickly went in to choose the room they liked. This group of impudent people. Hu Shichen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing Jiang Run and others still motionless behind him, he nodded secretly. Then he transmitted the sound to Su Li carefully. Lord Qingshui, you live in the main room in the middle. No, I'll choose one at random. You live in the main room. Su Li shook her head gently and walked into the courtyard. Xian only followed her flatteringly. Hu Shichen understood the meaning and didn't refute. Now Lord Qingshui was a disciple. If he lived in the main room, it would inevitably arouse vigilance if it was leaked out. He had better be careful. There were 60 rooms in the Spring Court Garden, and there were no more than 48 people in Jiguang's sect. The rooms were extremely exquisite and luxurious. Except for the main room in the middle, there was no difference in level. After 5 minutes, everyone settled down comfortably. At the same time, on the second floor of the Tianyain, Meng Bian opened the door and looked at the dozens of beds in the room. His face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Bastard! You've gone too far. You even let us live in the common room for servants. Zheng Shu, the first disciple standing next to Meng Bian, finally couldn't help it. He was about to go downstairs angrily, but was stopped by Meng Bian. Do you want everyone to sleep on the street? Zheng Shu stopped and suddenly turned around. He gritted his teeth and said, Elder, we are almost overtaken by those good-for-nothings in Jiguang's sect. How can we bear it? A little impatience will spoil great plans. Meng Bian snorted and walked into the room. Come in. A man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. We are suffering now. In the Tianjiao battle, you have to pay back to Jiguang's sect 1,000 times. They will all die. Zheng Shu took a deep breath and said in a fierce tone. He flicked his sleeves and stepped into the room. The rest of the people looked at each other and finally held back the grievance in their hearts. They walked into the room one after another. In the corridor, Xia Wei heard these words and couldn't help but shake her head. Where does your confidence come from? At this moment, another group of people swarmed in from the first floor. The leader was Ling Qinglan. Where is the shopkeeper? Coming. Xia Wei went downstairs and saw Ling Qinglan's face. Her pupils suddenly shrank. Yin tribe, EMO. Ling Qinglan raised his eyebrows slightly and showed a very faint smile. I have not used that name for a long time. Now, please call me Ling Qinglan, Lord of Xingxian Horizon. Xia Wei frowned slightly. She took the token from Ling Qinglan's hand and bowed her head to make the room plate. She said carelessly, it seems that you not only survived successfully but also know a lot. There were many Tianyan in Xingxian City, but there was only one Lord of Tianyan in each region of Qingshui Circle. He knew a lot about the Tianjiao of the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, especially the Yin tribe which had been destroyed not long ago. He originally thought that Emo had already died with the destruction of his soul, but he didn't expect that he was not only alive, but also his cultivation didn't fall. He looked up at the people behind Ling Qinglan. They were all strange faces, but their numas were obscure and extremely extraordinary. The force of record of Tianyan. Xia Wei was shocked and doubtful. When he saw the 3 words, Zhuzhou region, on the token in his hand, he was even more shocked. Lord of Xingxian Horizon, you don't need to be suspicious. It won't be long before your spies know my origin. But, not now. Ling Qinglan smiled slightly. During the Tianzhou battle, I hope Lord of Xingxian Horizon will be merciful and don't disclose our information. Xia Wei was silent and thought about the intention. Before he sorted out his thoughts, he saw that Ling Qinglan's face and Numa suddenly changed into a completely strange person, as if everything just now was an illusion. This time, Xia Wei was completely shocked. He didn't even know that the token in his hand fell to the ground. With his cultivation, it was impossible for him to have an illusion. The only possibility was that he couldn't see through the secret skill of camouflage. Thinking of this, he had another extremely frightening guess in his heart. He couldn't help but look at the people behind Ling Qinglan again. These people. At this moment, he finally sensed that a storm was coming. Something big might happen in this Tianzhou battle. Shopkeeper, have you finished making the house plate? Ling Qinglan, who had changed his face, asked Xia Wei to come back to reality. It was a blatant warning. He warned him not to disclose any information about the bloody accident of Holy Spirit to Tianyan before the end of the Tianzhou battle. He took a deep breath and erased the half-finished house plate. He took out an exquisite jade key from the drawer, and his expression returned to normal. He smiled and said, "It just so happens that an upper-rank sect had an accident today, so they couldn't stay in the garden. You're really lucky to have Chiu Court Garden." Facing Xia Wei's sudden kindness, Ling Qinglan was stunned. Then he took the jade key and smiled. "You deserve to be the Lord of Xingxian Horizon. You are so courageous. If we were in another situation, maybe I would like to be friends with you. Then, I really want to climb up the social ladder." Xia Wei chuckled. As the saying goes, harmony brings wealth. I, Tainik Attic, am just a businessman. I'm willing to help you with this. Chapter 564. Book Maze Lu, in 1 second, wonderful pop-up window free reading. After sending out the token of Choding Garden, Xia Wei personally led the way. After arranging the accommodation of Ling Qinglan and others, he hurriedly told the manager of the inn, returned to the study, and wrote a letter. After a while, Xia Wei put down the writing brush and looked at the words on the table. After a moment of silence, he seemed to have finally made a choice. His face relaxed and he put it in the drawer. Lord Tianqing did have a sign. The situation of this Tianzhou battle is gloomy and obscure. It seems to be mediocre, but it also seems to be turbulent with endless variables. It seems that a storm is coming. Xia Wei straightened up, turned his head, and looked at the sky with his hands behind his back. Looking at the fairy peak over the city, there was a deep feeling in his eyes. Even if you are the Fate ancestor, you can't be satisfied every time. It was like that 1,000 years ago, and 1,000 years later, it is still the same. After Ling Qinglan and others moved into Choding Garden, they asked a group of young disciples to return to their rooms. Then they took off their disguises and revealed their true faces. In addition to Ling Qinglan, there were Yan Zai, Dongfang Wuxue, Lvu, and Li Hai, the deputy lord of Yushu sect who led the team on the surface. As for Hua Yan and Yi Shui, they stayed in the sect to coordinate the overall situation. If ghosts like when Yuan Qing appeared in the Immortal Ascension City, it would cause panic. The secret method that Master taught us is really amazing. Xia Wei's cultivation is no less than that of nature's test, but he couldn't find any flaws. LVU's tone was a little excited. As a casual practitioner of Ghost Circle, he had the opportunity to come to the Supreme Immortal Ascension City in Qingshui Circle. If it was 10 years ago, he couldn't even think about it. When Ling Qinglan heard the word master, he frowned slightly. In his mind, only one person was worthy of this title. However, Su Jouzhou had done him a favor after all. Even if Su Jouzhou imitated that person everywhere and he was uncomfortable, he would not say anything on the surface. The Tianjiao battle will begin in 2 days. Let's have a rest, Li Hai said. Yan Zai nodded and smiled. Well, Ling Qinglan, you stay here. I will go out for a walk and see if there is any news of Master. Speaking of which, although we are nearly 2,000 years old, it is the first time for us to come to the Immortal Ascension City. Yes, Ling Qinglan responded. After thinking for a while, he reminded, pay attention to Void Sword Sect. After all, a complicated look flashed through Yan Zai's eyes, but in the blink of an eye, he recovered his open-mindedness and said with a faint smile, don't worry. With Master's secret method, even if we encounter the Void Sword Sect head-on, it doesn't matter. After saying this, he turned around and walked out of the gate, following the path he came from. This scene happened to be witnessed by Su Li, who just came out of the spring courtyard. Zai. Su Li was slightly stunned. She turned back and quietly scanned the neighboring garden with her divine awareness. She immediately saw Ling Qinglan and others who had not completely dispersed. They're actually next door. It was too coincidental. Moreover, even if Ling Qinglan warned the Tianyayin as she said, it was impossible for the Tianyayin to have one more yard at this time. The only possibility was, you occupied the Splendor Hall's courtyard. Su Li quickly figured out the cause and effect. She couldn't help but show a strange expression. She smiled and quietly followed Yan Zai. Yan Zai naturally didn't know all this. After walking out of the inn, he quickly came to the bustling street. He looked around and walked to the busiest city center. There are only 2 days left before the Tianjiao contest. Master should have arrived long ago, but I don't know which inn he lives in. Yan Zai thought in his heart and walked quickly. After a while, he came to the large square in the center of the city. The square had existed for a very long time, and the ancient traces left by time could be seen everywhere. The black ground was made of unknown stone. Even if it had been baptized by wind and rain, it still didn't have much damage. At this moment, the square was naturally overcrowded. The practitioners were of extremely high quality. They were all dragons and phoenixes among men. Among the 10 people, at least 3 were disciples of holy sects with noble backgrounds, and the rest were at least from middle-grade sections. Of course, most of them were casual practitioners and practitioners of low-grade sects who came to watch the fun. After all, according to the base number of practitioners in Qingshui Circle, the Tianjiao contest was a minority. A gathering of geniuses. What a grand scene. I don't know what my ranking in the Tianjiao contest can be with my current cultivation. Yan Zai sighed in his heart and approached the center of the square. Suddenly, he saw a huge black stone tablet standing in the center of the square, on which many names were flashing. This is... Yan Zai was stunned and walked quickly to the stone tablet. He immediately saw the flashing names, among which the top 10 names were particularly conspicuous. Ling Li, Chu Qingming, Yin Xuedong, Fang Mu, Zhou Linfeng, Luo Hong, Ling Xian. Zhao Qinyuan. Xian Yuer. Fong Lan. Su Li was also in the crowd at this moment, looking at the stone tablet with flickering eyes. Is this the Tainik Attic Star Tablet? I heard that before the Tianzhou contest, the predicted names of the top 10 talents will be revealed. Why are there so many unfamiliar faces this time? Tut tut, the disaster 1,000 years ago is well known. Many talents left and disappeared. It's good to see a few familiar faces. That's true. Many practitioners in the crowd whispered. Yan Zai looked at the name Zhou Linfeng, which ranked 5th, and was absent-minded. Junior fellow apprentice. He didn't care about other people in Void Sword Sect, but Zhou Linfeng, hurry up. At this moment, there was a commotion among the practitioners. Someone shouted, go and watch the fun. Zhou Linfeng and Luo Hong of Void Sword Sect are on the gambling platform. What? Hurry up. Let's go. If we are late, there will be no fun to watch. Many practitioners immediately rushed to the gambling platform. Yan Zai's face changed slightly, and he flashed away. It seems that Zai has feelings for Void Sword Sect. Su Li's eyes flickered slightly, and she followed him. Soon, the gambling platform was surrounded by practitioners. Yan Zai squeezed to the front without a trace. Sure enough, he saw a familiar face standing on the side of the gambling platform that he hadn't seen for many years. However, the junior fellow apprentice who only knew how to smirk now had a cold face and anger in his eyes. Zhou Linfeng, you are a coward. How can you rank ahead of me? Is Tainik Attic blind? On the other side of the gambling platform, Luo Hong, holding a long spear, sneered, what? Don't you continue to be a coward. Zhou Linfeng snorted, you can insult me. But you can't insult senior fellow apprentice Yan. Ha 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 ha, that traitor Yan Zai, you still call him senior fellow apprentice. Luo Hong suddenly laughed and said in a sarcastic tone, if Ling Mo hadn't run fast, I would have killed him. It's really bad luck for the Void Sword Sect to meet a traitor like you. Speaking of this, Luo Hong shook the long spear in his hand, and the blood-red brilliant sword. I will teach you a lesson on behalf of the elders of your sect. Luo Hong shouted in a low voice, and then suddenly rushed out with his long spear. His speed was so fast that all the practitioners under the platform exclaimed. As a member of Shura Holy Sect, he was extremely good at close combat. The gambling platform was very narrow, which was just what he wanted. Zhou Linfeng's eyes slightly condensed, and the spiritual power surged between his fingers and palms. It condensed into a black flying sword, surrounded by gray airflow. A wisp of extremely dangerous pneuma leaked out. Void Sword Technique. Someone in the crowd recognized it and was shocked. Only Yan Zai mastered the holy method of Void Sword Sect, and Zhou Linfeng really learned it. No wonder he stood out among the inherited disciples and became the successor of Yan Zai. Seeing this, Yan Zai was gratified, and his mind flashed back to the scene under the waterfall of the mountain, when his junior brother practiced Void Sword Technique hard under his guidance. The silly boy who always said he was stupid and couldn't learn can now be independent. Yan Zai felt infinite emotion in his heart, and the two people on the gambling platform had collided with each other. Clang! The spear and the sword collided, and sparks flew everywhere, which was extremely dazzling. A huge force poured into his body, and Zhou Linfeng took a step back with his sword, but Luo Hong took 2 steps back. He stood firm, and his face was slightly pale. Without saying a word, the long spear in his hand turned into a long dragon, and a fierce attack surged out from his hand, like a monstrous wave. Boom! 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 Zhou Linfeng's face was solemn, and he didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward and resisted all of Luo Hong's attacks with his hands. There was a loud bang. Shura Holy Sect's 13 waves of blood, and Luo Hong made 4 waves in a flash. It's really horrible. If it were me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to resist one spear. Zhou Linfeng is not simple either. He actually blocked all of them. Didn't you see that he didn't even take a step back? I think Zhou Linfeng is more powerful. The practitioners under the platform were talking about it. They didn't expect to see such a wonderful fight before the Tianzhou contest, and they all exclaimed. And the battle between the two people on the platform had also entered the climax. Buzz! The moment the two separated, Luo Hong suddenly restrained his murderous intent, and his figure quickly faded away. This scene suddenly made the audience fall into a dead silence, and then, there was an uproar. Oh my God, the secret method of the way of killing. Someone has learned the secret method of the way of killing. The Shura Holy Sect has a successor. I didn't expect that after the bloody accident of Holy Spirit, the Holy Sects didn't fall short of successors, and the new generation of Tianzhou shone brilliantly. Yan Zai was nervous, and worry flashed through his eyes. Su Li saw this scene in the crowd. Isn't this the move that Ling Imo used in the Bloody World? Is he from the Shura Holy Sect? She didn't deliberately investigate the origin of these old friends. She would meet them when she dealt with the Holy Sects in the future, so there was no need to waste effort. She knew some details about the Shura Holy Sect. It was originally a killer force. Ling Mo's cold and aloof character was really a killer material. No wonder he became the head of killers in the reincarnation mirror. When Su Li was lost in thought, there was another change on the platform. Zhou Linfeng snorted coldly. He grasped the black flying sword in his hand and swept out an arc-shaped shock wave. Void sword technique, void shock. Buzz! A shock force rushed to all directions in the blink of an eye, and then a figure appeared in the left rear. Before he could stand firm, the black flying sword swept over and stopped at his neck. You lost. Zhou Linfeng said coldly. Luo Hong's movement was stagnant, and his face instantly became gloomy. You just practiced the first hurdle of the way of killing. Who gave you the courage to slander my senior fellow apprentice? Zhou Linfeng exerted force in his hand, and blood suddenly appeared on Luo Hong's neck. The dark red blood beads dripped along the flying sword. Apologize. At this moment, Zhou Linfeng's words were full of anger, and the suppressed anger in his eyes finally burst out. Chapter 565. Apologize. Not a chance. Luo Hong sneered and suddenly burst into a cloud of black fog. His ethereal voice came from all directions. A traitor is a traitor. Do you think you can defeat me easily if I don't want to use more powerful means? Zhou Linfeng tightened his grip on the flying sword, but found that Luo Hong had already flown away from the gambling platform. His voice full of killing intent came, Our Shura Holy Sect is not good at frontal combat. I will let you live for 2 more days, and I will kill you in the Tianzhou list. Zhou Linfeng's eyes were slightly gloomy, but there was no fear in his eyes. Holy Sun Zhou, you won exclusively. The steward of the gambling platform held a universe ring. Zhou Linfeng put it away and took a deep look at the direction where Luo Hong left. Then he calmly stepped down from the platform. Luo Hong didn't use his trump card, and he didn't use any of his trump cards either. It was still unknown who would be the winner at that time. Yan Zai, who was hidden in the crowd, had a gleam in his eyes. The little junior fellow apprentice has really grown up, but he still protects me like this. I am afraid that in the sect, thinking of this, Yan Zai frowned and followed him without a trace. Seeing this, Su Li didn't continue to follow him. Although she hated the holy sects, she didn't hate all the disciples of the holy sections. For example, Zhou Linfeng still protected Yan Zai, which was rare and commendable. If there was a chance in the future, she could bring him to the Ni sect and train him well. After the reincarnation mirror, she naturally understood the importance of power. If she wanted to fight against so many holy sects in Qingshui Circle, she couldn't rely on herself. After a while, Su Li left the square and went straight to the buildings at the foot of the Immortals Mountain along the streets of the ancient city. The Immortals Mountain was very large, but not all areas were inhabited. There was an inexplicable pressure in some areas, which squeezed all the nimbus in the nothingness. No one was willing to come here. Following the faint guidance in her heart, Su Li came to one of the places of pressure, a dilapidated thatched cottage. Along the path overgrown with weeds, Su Li slowly stepped into the cottage, raising a thick layer of dust on the ground, which was constantly churning in the beams of light that were cast into the cottage. Whoosh! Su Li suddenly stopped. She looked down and saw that a slate on the ground was broken into powder and blown away with the wind, revealing the original black soil. The soil was a little red. At a glance, it looked like flesh and blood. It was as if the world had suddenly quietened down. It was so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Even though the hut was warm in color, it made the feeling of terror even more intense. This is just an ordinary grass hut. I'm afraid it has been decaying for tens of thousands of years, but it still hasn't collapsed. Su Li looked around, and there was a sense of caution in her eyes. There was a strange pneuma everywhere here. Don't be careless. Black Lotus flashed out of the ring. His eyes were vigilant, and his tone was serious. He was no longer as carefree as before. I don't know why the ghost race's bewitching ghost city is here. However, back then, it was a secret realm of the ghost race. Even I don't know all the secrets of this place. For example, I don't have any impression of this place. There was no such place in the previous ghost city. Su Li answered softly, but did not mention the feeling of calling in her heart. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the grass hut was still quiet and there was nothing unusual. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly and stepped out again. This time, she passed the courtyard full of weeds and entered the cottage. The lights suddenly dimmed, and there was a sense of dampness on her face. But Su Li didn't feel comfortable. My clan was exterminated. Even the sacred city was moved, but I didn't notice it at all. Then why do I guard the holy lotus seat? Obviously, he didn't expect that the world would change so much when he woke up. He was so confused that he even forgot to maintain his calm on the surface. Su Li didn't disturb the old man's meditation. She leaned against the crumbling door, took out a bottle of spiritual wine from the universe ring, and drank it slowly. There were still 2 days before the Tianjia battle, so there was no hurry. Although the old man in black was old, he thought fast. After only an hour, he calmed down and sighed, "Little girl, do you have any wine?" As soon as he finished speaking, Su Li took out a bottle of wine from the universe ring and threw it out. "It's not good wine. Senior, please don't dislike it." The old man in black took a big gulp of wine and smiled. "Little girl, you are very interesting. I wanted to kill you, but now the world has changed greatly, and it is meaningless to kill people. How much do you know about the Tianjia battle?" Su Li turned her head and glanced at the old man in black, and sighed, "My kindness is unrequited. I saw that no one was accompanying you, so I stayed. I didn't expect that you not only wanted to kill me, but also wanted to continue to gain something for nothing." The old man in black laughed when he heard this. "Well, I will give you the reward for solving the puzzle just now. I have no money, but fortunately, I have some small things to keep me alive." As he said, he waved his sleeves and threw out a light, which Su Li caught. After the light dissipated, there was a shabby book lying in her palm. Notes in the Thatched Cottage. Sully read the words on the cover of the book, and the old man in black was surprised. You can read the characters of the Ghost Clan. Sully didn't answer. She opened the book and glanced at it. She was immediately attracted by the profound practice method in it, and she was secretly shocked. It was worthy of being taken out by the old guy of the All Spirits calendar. This book looked inconspicuous, but it recorded the true explanation of the sword intent. Although she had understood the sword intent, she couldn't make progress for a long time, so she couldn't use the destruction sword intent and became useless. But with this note, it was no longer difficult to practice the sword intent. Sully smiled. In this way, even if she only got this essay in the Immortal Ascension City, she would make a profit. Since you can read the characters, it will save a lot of trouble. The old man in black said lightly, but he felt a little pity in his heart. He could use the characters of the Ghost Clan as a bargaining chip, but he didn't expect that he miscalculated. I am very satisfied with your gift, Senior. Sully put away the essay, and her tone became a little cheerful. As for the Tianzhou battle, it has something to do with the holy sections. I also heard it from an elder of a top-grade sect on my way here. The Immortal Ascension Mountain is related to the fate of Qingshui Circle. And the list of the Tianzhou list is tied to the fate of the entire sect in Qingshui Circle. In short, if a young disciple in the sect can get a good ranking in the Tianzhou list, the sect can receive more blessings and gradually develop and grow stronger. And if you can occupy 1% of the fate of the entire Tianzhou list in the Tianzhou battle, you are qualified to be a holy sect. And if you occupy more than half of the fate of the Tianzhou list, you can be the peak holy sect. Holy sect. The old man in black frowned. What's the use of being a holy sect? Sully squinted her eyes and said gently, only by being a holy sect can the practitioners in the sect break the bottleneck. Otherwise, they can only be trapped in nature's test and wait for death. The old man in black was shocked. Restriction of the natural law. Chapter 566. Senior, what did you think of? Sully said quietly, interrupting the old man's thoughts. The old man in black frowned and snorted coldly, fighting for fate with the Tianzhou list. According to what you said, it should be the Wangtian tablet of the Buddha Yuan ancient temple, the sacred place of human clans Buddhism. It is said that it contains all kinds of methods, including many secret skills. Sully pretended to be surprised. The Wangtian tablet. Yes. The old man in black seemed to be lost in memory, but at that time, the human clan who could leave their names on the Wangtian tablet didn't get fate, but Buddha's relics, which could help people improve their cultivation after refining. Changing the world. Letting the Wangtian tablet carry the fate of a world is absolutely against the law of nature. What happened during the years when I was asleep? The old man in black faintly smelled a conspiracy, but helplessness flashed in his eyes when his eyes fell on the black lotus under the guanyin. Senior, haven't you ever thought of leaving here to find out the truth? Sully's words sounded timely, almost touching the old man's heart. If it was in the past, I might be able to do my part for this world, but now, I can't. Why? Sully put the flagon aside and looked at the guanyin statue meaningfully. Is it because this thing suppressed you, Senior? You can tell me the reason. Maybe I can help you. Why are you so obsessed with my freedom? The old man in black was surprised. He couldn't help but look at Sully again vaguely, but the conclusion he got was the same as before. This girl was an ordinary young female practitioner of human clan. She was even too young. Her bone age was less than 50 years, and she was in Yuanying realm. Even in his time, such a little girl was a genius. But when it came to helping, it was a fantasy. Sully didn't answer. She just stared at the old man in black, and there was only clarity and sincerity in her eyes. The old man in black seemed to think of something. His expression suddenly softened, and the killing intent in his heart dissipated. "Well, I don't mind telling you." He smiled, and the wrinkles on his face were like tree bark. "Do you know the existence of the Ghost Clan?" "I have seen it in the classics of the sect." Sulig nodded seriously. "That's an extinct race. I heard that it was extremely powerful." Black Lotus, who was in the ring, rolled his eyes. His cunning little master was talking nonsense again to deceive people, no, to deceive ghosts. Black Coat, Ghost Clan, could it be? Black Lotus pinched his chin thoughtfully, but he didn't remind Suli, "This old man is a member of the ghost race." The black-robed old man went straight to the point and said calmly, "Back then, I made a grave mistake and was punished to swear an oath to guard the Holy Lotus for all eternity until a true successor of the Holy Lotus appeared in my clan." At this point, although the black-clothed old man's mood was still calm, his tone unconsciously carried a trace of bitterness. However, even the patriarch would not have thought that with the passage of time, even the ghost clan no longer exists, who would be able to break the oath. Saint Lotus. Su Li's sight fell on the statue of Guanyin and she said, "Is this the Black Lotus? Why don't you let me try?" Hee, the black-robed old man laughed. "Even if this old man agrees to let you try the sacred relic of my ghost race, a mere human like you will not be able to withstand it. I repeatedly woke up and fell asleep, but in the end, I couldn't wait for that clansman. My thoughts have already faded, so there's no need to force it." Su Li curled her lips. "Elder, don't underestimate me just because I'm young. I'm a heaven's chosen one of the human race. Maybe I'm the one you're waiting for." "Ha ha ha," the black-robed old man laughed out loud. "Little human girl, you are indeed too young. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you have a bit of talent?" Seeing that Su Li was still not convinced, the elder in black shook his head and slowly stepped aside. "Well, it is fate that we meet. I'll wake you up and make you understand that there's always someone better out there." "Humph. Old senior, I'll prove it to you." Su Li immediately stood up and jumped to the front of the Guanyin statue. She asked confidently, "Elder, what should I do?" In the eyes of the black-clothed old man, her current appearance made it seem as if she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Holding the mentality of watching a joke, he replied, "Place your hand on the lotus platform and calmly sense it." Finally, it came to this step. Su Li looked slightly serious. She stretched out her hand and gently covered the black lotus throne. 1 breath, 2 breaths, the Guanyin statue did not respond. Although the black-robed old man did not hold any hope, he couldn't help but sigh slightly when he saw this scene. With a comforting tone, he said gently, "This is the 12th grade Holy Lotus. The Holy Lotus has a spirit. Even the most talented patriarch of the Ghost Clan could not subdue it. You are not even a member of the Ghost Clan. How could you, Before the black-robed old man finished his words, his old eyes suddenly widened. He was completely shocked by the scene in front of him. The black lotus throne shook faintly, and immediately came to life as if it had found a home. It quickly became smaller and integrated into Su Li's pubic region. The obviously noble Numa revealed urgency and uneasiness, as if Su Li was afraid of abandoning it. It was as humble as dust. Boom! Without the black lotus throne, the Guanyin statue could not support it and collapsed, blasting a huge pit on the decayed floor. The black-robed old man seemed not to hear it. He stared blankly at Su Li, who had sat cross-legged on the ground. His lips trembled and his face was full of horror. The Holy Lotus chose the human clan. Su Li's divine awareness sank into her pubic region and immediately saw the pocket-sized black lotus of the 12th grade that was circling around her black lotus throne of the 18th grade. She impatiently wanted to integrate into it, but couldn't. Suli looked at the 12th grade Black Lotus unhurriedly. At the moment when she touched it, she sensed that there was a ghost clan's forbidden oath in her awareness sea. The black-robed old man could not hurt her, but also became her slave. Although the restriction is a little big, it is definitely a good card in this ghost town. Thinking of this, Suli's eyes left the forbidden oath and returned to her pubic region. Her eyes were cold. Black Lotus, do you still want to continue pretending to be dead? I am afraid that the old guy will find out and affect your plan. Black Lotus's embarrassed voice came into her mind. Congratulations, Master. You got the most precious treasure of the Ghost Clan, the 12th grade Black Lotus transforming into sword. Transforming into sword. Suli thought and looked at the pocket-sized lotus throne flying in her pubic region. It turns out that this is the transforming into sword. She had a good memory. Naturally, she remembered that as early as when she broke through Zhuji realm, Black Lotus told her that the transforming into sword could transform into 18 Black Lotus swords. If she could control them, her power would be infinite. There are some loopholes in what I said before. Black Lotus's tone was a little cautious. Throughout the history of this circle, there has never been an 18th grade transforming into sword. Even the 12th grade transforming into sword is a legend. I thought it disappeared in time. I didn't expect that you are so lucky to meet it. Suli looked as usual, without any surprise of getting the treasure. She just stared at the Black Lotus shadow. What else are you hiding from me? Tell me all of them. Black Lotus suddenly sweated on his forehead. He rubbed his hands awkwardly and said honestly, this old man in black is similar to the dragon's shadow in the ancestral land of the ghost region. They are also old monsters in the years of all spirits calendar. But I have some impression of him. His reputation in the history books of the Ghost Clan is quite big. If I remember correctly, he should be the only genius of the branch of the prehistoric Ghost Clan, named Yi Che. There are not many of them, but they are famous for making Yi Ji. In the years of the All Spirits calendar, Yi Ji was a famous delicacy of the Ghost Clan. Yi Ji. Delicacy. Suli thought of the ugly blue monster she saw that year, and couldn't help but feel strange. Did the taste of the prehistoric Ghost Clan all have such a strange taste? Ahem, don't think too much. At that time, Yi Ji was as cute as a domestic pig in the secular world. Later, I don't know what happened, and Yi Ji became like that. Anyway, I haven't eaten it. It's awful. You haven't eaten it, but you know it's awful. Suli raised her eyebrows and didn't expose him. At this moment, she finally confirmed the long-time guess in her heart. Black Lotus was not a very smart spirit, and she didn't know how he survived to the present. How should I integrate the transforming sword skill? Suli asked, suppressing the thought in her heart. Open up your mind and allow it to merge with your foundation. However, nurturing these 12 swords is not something that can be done in a short period of time. You need an ocean's worth of ghostly chi to support it. Speaking of business, Black Lotus was reliable. After explaining in detail, Suli let go of the control of her pubic region. The pocket-sized lotus throne quickly integrated into the base like a swallow returning to its nest, without any hindrance, as if the two were originally one. When the transforming sword skill was completely integrated into the base, Suli immediately felt that there were 12 more subtle pneumas in the base, with a sense of coldness and sharpness. And the extra 6th grade pneumas were still in a state of silence. If I find another 6th grade transforming sword skill, can I integrate it into it? This thought flashed in Suli's mind, and then she put it away. The Ghost Clan had long been extinct, and there was little news about it in Qingshui's circle. It was impossible to find the transforming sword skill in a short time, so she had to pay attention to it later. The integration of the transforming sword skill seemed to be fast, but in fact, it took Su Li a day and a half. It's time to go back to Tianyan to meet. Su Li opened her eyes, and a very faint black light flashed in her eyes. The black-robed elder, who was meditating aside, sensed the movement and immediately got up to bow. "Master, I'm Yi Che." Su Li accepted the bow calmly and immediately said, "Senior Yi, I accept this bow, and you don't have to bow to me anymore. You don't have to worry that I will ask you to do something with a forbidden oath." Hearing this, the biggest stone in Yi Che's heart was suddenly dropped, but he looked sad and lonely. He was a genius in the past, but he never thought that he would fall into such a situation and become a slave of a little girl of the human clan. Su Li was very sensitive, and she saw through Yi Che's mentality. She immediately chuckled, "Senior Yi, don't worry about it. Those who were in the same generation as you have already become the ashes of time. You'd better get over it. Relatively speaking, you do get freedom, but I still need to remind you. I don't know how many years have passed since the All Spirits calendar, but the time span is at least more than 40,000 years. You have lived for too long. It's okay if you are in the Xingxian mountain, but if you leave, the natural law will inevitably send nature's punishment." Su Li's words and manners were extremely rigorous, and she seemed to be a different person from before. Hearing this, Yi Che's face changed slightly, and he finally realized that you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.